Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our work session dated May 12th, 2021. It's 6:36, and let's stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. We're going to do attendance roll call. Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. Trustee Fritchie?
Present.
Trustee Casada, or I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor Casada.
Present.
Trustee White?
Present.
Trustee Lopez?
Present.
And Mayor Levin.
Present.
All right, thank you.
Okay, let me show this up. Okay. I think this is better. Thank you. So we are starting early tonight because we have a short but packed agenda. Welcome everyone, lots of people on the gallery. So we're going to, I'm just looking at this to see if, I think there are just a couple of announcements. So I'd like to, even though it's not on the agenda, I'd like to do some announcements. I have a couple of important announcements and updates for the community. So if anybody has an announcement, let's do that now.
I have one. It's the Westchester Craft Crawl is happening this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, and there are locations in several villages, including Ossining. We have the most locations, and it's really high quality crafts, all sorts of glass and clay and jewelry, and it's really fun. And you can go from one location to another and check out what's for sale. And I did it last year and it was a lot of fun, and it's much bigger this year, and it's really, really quality goods. So go to westchestercraftcrawl.com and you will see, you will have a Google map that will show you where the locations are for you to shop. And we have several of our local businesses are also sponsors. So you can also check that out as well.
Great, thank you, Trustee White. Anyone else? Okay. So I want to start with the most recent event because it went on social media and it hit some of the media outlets that there was a bomb scare earlier today at the Caputo Community Center. A lot of material already went out. We evacuated the staff, the police, and the appropriate county authorities were called immediately. There were protocols in place. Everything was checked out, clean bill of health. We thank all of the police involved, our local police, our chief of police, who went on social media to then explain what was going on. But for those that weren't tuned in, we had the bomb scare. The staff dealt with the bomb scare and everything went back to normal pretty quickly. I want to say within 45 minutes to an hour, and regular programming was resumed. So kudos to everybody that deals with, these type of situations. And it will be further investigated. The investigation, I'm sure, will not be discussed until some results are in. So I thank everybody involved. It really sort of turns things upside down when you get these kind of calls. So I'm glad that everything worked out well, and we're going to move forward. That's frankly the entire story. These things happen. We're prepared. We deal. We move forward. Of course, any agenda items that and meetings that were to be had earlier today didn't happen because it's always the safety of the community comes first. So I thank everybody in this gallery and the police department and everybody else that was involved. So that really is all there is to report on that. So we're going to move on. Please, there are many places now where COVID shots are available, in many cases for free. I could only encourage every person in our community to go get their vaccination shots for the sake of their family, themselves, their colleagues, their neighbors in the community. Star of Bethlehem website has information about, they are partnering with Open Door to get COVID shots. I sent out in the mayor's note yesterday that Metro North is partnering with Westchester Med to also do COVID shots at a pop-up right at Metro North. It is the only location on the Hudson Line in Westchester County. So we're very fortunate to have it in our backyard. They are free, and you get a Metro card or a Long Island Railroad card if for whatever reason you want to go there. So please, making it as easy as possible, and teenagers are also added to the list in short order to also be able to get vaccinated. So I hope that everybody gets vaccinated so that we can get everybody in the community, because the whole goal here is to get as many people vaccinated as possible. Only if a third of the people being vaccinated does not actually solve the bigger issue. So those were my two bigger notes, and I think we have a lot to talk about, because a comprehensive plan is, so as trustees and with staff, it's one of the most important plans that we put together, because it drives a lot of decisioning for our land use boards, which includes zoning, planning, EAC, historic, and how they make decisions in the next 10 years, how our staff makes decisions, the kind of development that goes on, our view of the environment, and there's 10 chapters that I can keep going on and on about. So who is our lead person to start? Do I just turn it over to you, village manager, and take it from there? Or is there some lead person I'm supposed to point to here?
Unless there's more announcements, we can start the agenda.
We're starting the agenda.
Okay, so good evening, everybody. First up, we do have our consultants from BFJ here tonight. So we have Frank and Simon and Sylvia back. They will be discussing changes to the comprehensive plan and the zoning recommendations, and also soliciting more feedback from the Board of Trustees. So with that, I would like to hand it over to our colleagues from BFJ.
Mayor and members of the board, I'll just start with we just wanted to highlight for you what we had sent you Friday, and then Simon followed up yesterday with actual sort of text. We thought it would be helpful just for your discussion. We had sort of highlighted 5 items, and I think it's for your decision and your, really your discussion tonight. And the first one is to just remove the recommendation on accessory units from the plan. The second is also the same for the MF3 zoning district. And then also, if we understood what, we were trying to listen to past discussions, remove the recommendation for the 3 family units in the 2-family district. And then there were some comments from Omar, from Trustee Lopez, revising the language on code enforcement. When we took a crack at that, trying to pick up what he had mentioned the last time we were with you. And then also you had this recommendation from the planning board, and it seemed to us that that was a good recommendation that they made coming out of their letter. So we added that to this. So those were the basically the 5 things we sent to you. And I think we didn't plan to spend much time presenting anything tonight, because we thought, tonight is basically your discussion and your lead, but we wanted to start with those 5 that we did send to you. So with that, I think, Mayor, unless there's questions or discussion, we could hand it back to you for discussion of the board.
Okay, thank you. So your idea is to start with what was just sent to us yesterday and then move from there. Is that your idea, Frank?
Well, I thought that would be just a help to stimulate the discussion. And there may be other things that you've all considered. Mayor, I know you had mentioned yesterday in an email that you had some thoughts also.
Right.
So we just thought those were things that we had been hearing over time, and to maybe start with those if you wish.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense. I can't control this because it's being shared. So let's go through that. And I have, I don't know, about a page and a half of big bold type bullet points. So it's not too bad. I also looked at what Trustee White had sent. So I did not see what others have sent except what you already described. So let's start here because for me, it actually shortened the commentary I had. So remove I don't know if I need to read all of these. The accessory door, we talked about that. Everything you put on this is what I think was agreed on. And I guess for the record, I should probably read it. Remove recommendation to consider the MF3 zoning district. Remove recommendation to allow 3-family units as a conditional use of 2-family. Revised language on code enforcement per Trustee Lopez. So I guess I would say what that revision would be. I believe his his commentary was about the use of, you know what, Omar, I know what it's about, illegal housing and actually calling it something else. But I think you actually have to name it rather than just say revised language on code. Omar, do you want to give us your language? I don't like to speak for, I don't like to speak for people, so.
Yeah, no worries. So first I want to thank you, Frank, and your team because the changes here are helpful. The term that I was using before was housing exploitation.
Right.
And largely what I find is that in the, I have 2 comments, one big, one small. The big comment is that the added language is good. I think that it adds some more context. To me, it still lacks, yes, it's this language here. It still lacks a sense of urgency. It still lacks a sense of accessibility in some ways, so that folks that are coming to us from different perspectives, those that live in housing that is that falls under this category, what the mayor just called illegal housing, folks that are just in the community that are saying, like, here are the effects, first responders, like, lots of people. This response to some of it, it just feels a little dry. Now, to me, it may be that, and that's no shade and no, no disrespect. It may be that this is not a kind of document that's supposed to engender excitement or tickle the imagination about what is possible. It may be that it's just supposed to, in technical terms, describe what is actually possible and what will get done. To me, it's like, if you want to do some close reading here, like, nonprofits can also play a role in educating tenants on decent and safe housing. To me, it's like, I would make that 3 or 4 sentences to say nonprofits play a role. I wouldn't say can play, I say they do play a role, particularly because we're not naming specific nonprofits. We're not holding anyone to account. You can just say nonprofits play a role in educating tenants on decent and safe housing, and then expand on that. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean that explaining to them to whom they should go if they have an issue? What happened? Just like adding some context to it, because this assumes that someone that is reading it is going to know what it means. I don't know if it's worth going through the effort of bulking this up, because really, although it's a guiding document, the folks that are at the very least in elected office now and that are in the village staff have a keen sense of what the problem is and understand the sense of urgency around it. And so it's not meant to move us to move any more quickly or urgently to address this issue. So, I don't want you to go through unnecessary drama.
No, I think your comment's very good, Omar. We went through this Tuesday morning with the building inspector, and and, you know, with Jaime Martinez and with Stuart and so we tried to get at it as best we could. So yeah, there is a clear understanding among staff. You're right. So it's just a matter of how we strengthen this a little.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's the big comment that I have. The little comment is there is just some language here that I mentioned how some of it is a little soft, like I can play or whatever, but others is like in the very last sentence, these efforts need to be on a continual, ongoing basis. To me, you could just choose one of those words. It's a little bit redundant. It's either a continuing basis, ongoing basis. A continuing, ongoing basis is a little bit redundant, but that's it.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not sure if, I'm sorry. Do you have something else? I do have to.
I want to just interject. It's an interjection really about the whole meeting. I find these meetings difficult because if I were in my office and what I do full time, I would, and not that I didn't do it because I've got the entire document here with Post-its all over it. I would actually sit here and do it page by page. It will take us hours to do that, and I can. So I'm trying to figure out what the bulk is, right? Like what Omar just said with the big question, the little question, because we could be here all night, because I could actually edit this document forever. And I've edited it a number of times. It's not a great, it's good for me to do because it allows me to be in the detail, but it's not for me, I'm trying to figure out the balance to this meeting of how we could be most helpful and useful in this conversation, because we could stay on this one page for an hour. And I could start us off by going to the paragraph right before this, and we could be doing this for an hour. So I'm trying to get some guidance from my colleagues, from staff, from consultants, to sort of stay maybe not 50,000 feet, but not 5 feet, like somewhere, because I'm struggling. I could go to the paragraph right above and have a whole conversation about housing units and that word, and why units are used so much throughout the document. So I'm trying to figure out, Frank or someone else, you got to guide us a little bit on how to have this or Karen, somebody has to guide us a little bit of how you want to manage the next hour, because I could spend an hour on a page here alone. So how do you want to manage this?
Yeah, I would say not to do what you said at a 30,000 foot level. What are your key issues? We tried to guess, not guess, but approximate what they might be from what we've heard.
Okay.
That's why we concentrated on these 4 issues plus Trustee Lopez's issue. I think we shouldn't try to wordsmith things tonight or go page by page. I think we should get trustees. Here's a big 5 issues. Are you in agreement with those conceptually? Then are there some other issues? Then let us go back and we'll be meeting with staff again Tuesday. We can then try to wordsmith those once we know the issues. Tonight for us was very much to listen to you.
The macro.
Yeah, here's 5 issues. Do you have some other big issue we missed, or do the trustees have some other issue?
Okay.
And wordsmithing we should let we should try to do, I think, maybe with our Tuesday morning meeting a little bit, getting ready for that.
Okay, so let me suggest this, Mandy, before you go on. Let me suggest this. I'm going to read through the commentary that they submitted to go through the proposed changes and definition, and just finished. No, I think I did finish. What I'd like to do is, if each of you, so Manny, if you want to go next, stay macro. If you have some pages and all that, if it's wordsmithing, just send it in to them and say, look, I've got a couple of issues on this chapter and this chapter. There are 10 chapters, I think. But let's stay with like key macro. I know Dana sent hers in. So if we could just go in order and not do a back and forth on an issue, I think we will then be able to go through the entire list. And then we can go back and say, on this one thing that Omar Lopez brought up, I want to go a little bit into more detail. And I think that may be the format for tonight. I'm going to look to make sure I'm good with everybody. I'm checking in. Okay, it looks okay. So let's just do it that way. We have what you sent. I don't think that we have to, in a work session, actually go through all the changes you gave. That'll become part of a public record at some point. We all have it. We should have all read it, or could read it tonight. So who would like to start with their macro, let's call it, half a dozen or so, or dozen macro issues, so that these folks can go back and say, okay, we're bringing it all in.
Mayor, if I may, because I do
Please.
have to jump off about 7:25 to another meeting and jump back into this meeting.
Great. Okay.
So I would like to start. Thanks everyone, Frank, Simon, Sylvia, for all this. So I just as an overall portion of here, sure, the DGIS, the document that was sent out, part of the document had a lot of information that we, the trustees, or the majority of the trustees, agree that it should not be part of that anymore. So I want to make sure that all the language reflects. I want it, when this document is done, I don't want to see the language that MF3s will be there. I don't want to see the parking. I don't want to see any of that language. And I think that was clear last time. So I want to make sure that that is clear again, that I don't want to see the MF3 was created for future boards. Like the mayor said last time, if the future boards wants to do that, they can do it on their own. But me personally, and I think I can speak for the majority of the board, I want to say that should be totally out of that picture, including parking in front of the yards, including different things that we talked about. That being said, I do want to concentrate on a couple of things. And this is a question now, and this is a question to Stuart. This is a question probably to Frank, and obviously I don't know how can we go from here. Sure. One of the questions that I have is, we looked at the whole plan. One of the things that is part of our current zoning regulations and is part of the current comprehensive plan is about parking and parking regulations and parking requirements. Something that we did not necessarily touch too much in here, that I think is critical, that I believe I share the same sentiment of the mayor, and mayor, please correct me if I'm wrong, but looking into the appendix C of parking in our table, requirements for different groups depending on the different zones where you are. Let's say the NC2, the GD, the CBD, the IR zone, they require 1.25 spaces for efficiency or studios, and 1.5 spaces for one bedroom, and 2 spaces per unit and within a 2-bedroom or more. Part of the struggle that I believe we have for the longest with developers is this, at least to me, and Mayor, please correct me if I'm speaking out of term with you, but one of the things that we have said is that we should increase the requirements for the parking regulations on this type of developments. I don't agree with 1.25 or 1.5 spaces. So when can we talk about this? And when can we change this? Is this part of this? Yes, please.
I'm sorry I should have introduced this tonight as I did at the last meeting, and I think, is Stuart on? I hope he is.
Yeah, of course.
One thing that I should have mentioned or reminded everyone of is, you're now reviewing something, a document that's gone through the public hearing process. So the comments are expected to be now from the trustees about matters on the record.
Okay.
In other words,
Understood.
You should not raise at this point. I shouldn't say you should not raise. Of course you can raise it, but we should should avoid raising a new issue that hasn't been covered, that isn't in the plan, because that issue really should come. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, discuss this, but it should be at another, it should be a zoning change in the future from the plan, because if you raise something new, you'll be in an endless cycle of public hearings. In other words, something new that the public has not heard now, that is a new change that they haven't had a chance to examine or comment on, could require another public hearing. I think you all want to avoid that.
I totally understand, and that's the reason why I'm asking the question.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'll discuss that with Stuart and staff.
Yeah, with Stuart and
if the board wants to support that.
Yeah.
If I could only add one item to what Frank said, I think it is, while you don't want to be bringing up new issues at this time, it's not totally unmerited to ask the question as to whether or not the comp plan will allow you to examine this later. That way, at least we know that the comp plan is not going to prevent you from, getting into these questions later. Right?
Yeah.
So
And that one,
I'm
I
assuming
can
most of
answer
the questions you're going
easily.
to
The
present are
answer is
not.
yes.
Okay, no problem.
Yes, the
Understood.
comp
Thank
plan
you.
allows you to raise that question later. You can do it later, Manny, and you can
Yep.
do a separate zoning change for that.
No problem.
But
Thank
for
you.
now, the focus needs to be on what the public has seen
Okay.
in the plan.
So let me
You
go
feel
to the
there's a change
document
to it.
that is dated March 3rd, sure, the comprehensive plan updating zoning amendments. So let me go to the page that I was just on, and I think this is more like some clarifications in portions of that, sure, and concerns that I had in regards to the information that is there that I'm sure you guys are aware and most likely going to be updating. And now I cannot find that page. Where is it? Okay, so that is page 37 of the document. The information of the built out for the next 10 years, the increase of 20% to 25%. I'm assuming that is going to change because that was based on an old information, I want to say. That was based on accessory apartments. That was based on multifamilies, the MF3. Is that something that you guys going to be updating as well? Or should be updated as well?
I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
can I?
Yeah, go
Frank,
ahead, Simon. Go ahead.
Manny, are you looking at the comprehensive plan or the DGEIS?
The DGIS part of that. Yeah, which part, it goes back to the comprehensive plan as well.
Yeah, in the, Sylvia, correct me, I believe that we did not put any numbers in for the MF3 or for.
That was not part of that process? That was not
part of it.
included in there?
The DEIS was revised downward in the number of units that would be created and in the number of public school children. So Manny, the EIS, the DGIS has been all, that's been removed and those numbers are now less. And in fact, it makes the EIS so much easier. As you know, there were no comments. So we're going to be able to make positive, even more positive findings for you on that. So that's out and we've revised those numbers downward. You're right.
Okay,
Yep.
that's great. So now let me jump into the maps, sure, because this is something that I was looking into as well. And obviously I would like to hear a little bit more of what you guys, because this is going to be part of the comprehensive plan as well. Give me 1 second. Besides that, I mean, I think overall, taking out those units, taking out all the stuff, moving forward with that, I think I just have more questions. Will be more related to Stuart, as you mentioned, Frank, than anything else. Because to me, so now on here, sure, we have a proposed plan for zoning, where we are shifting, because this is part of the public documents, correct? So I want to make sure that I'm talking within term itself. So some of this stuff in here, I'm seeing a reduction of commercial spaces and light industrial from the existing to the proposed. So that to me is a concern. And we don't have to talk about this. I can send you that information. I can send you the maps, and you guys can explain that in the memo.
Manny, and you know what, we could do that maybe even tomorrow. If you send it to us, we can take it.
Yeah, I think my overall questions again were, on the DGIS, the information, all that stuff. I think you guys have covered all those. And again, I just want to clarify, but I want to make sure that none of the language is part of the comprehensive plan. And the other questions that I have, more concerning questions, is more on zoning changes. You're right, Frank, that I think I will have to have a conversation with the board. And if they're willing to do that, then we can move forward from there. And that I'm going to I'm going to put additional information for Stuart to help me out with that. I know Stuart's working on other stuff as well. So I don't have any additional questions right now. So I'm going to yield the floor to anybody else. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Manny. I just have a quick question. You have to jump off. I appreciate that. And you're coming back approximately when? You're on mute.
You say about 5 minutes. So
Oh,
it
I
should not
thought.
take that long. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I'm
it
sorry.
should be like
So
a
you
5
said,
minute
yeah,
jump in and
7:20
out.
to 7:30. No problem. No, appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, I heard. Thanks, Manny, and I just heard from Mr. Fritchie.
yeah. To piggyback on the parking, when I look through it, it's really, I believe the comprehensive plan just kind of breezes through parking with the suggestion of maybe a parking structure. But this is like a twofold subject for me because I had a conversation today with Stuart about this falls into the zoning and the codes of, and I'm not, it's new, but I'm understanding this, that I could bring this in for future consideration, have it put in the plan for future, so we don't open up a whole can of worms, like you're saying, for more meetings with the a change to the code that would bring any parking or parking variances to the Board of Trustees. So that's something Stuart, am I saying that right?
You are, Trustee Fritchie, and the only sort of caveat I would put there is that the zoning board does have the authority with regard to the variances, and since they are the only ones who can grant an area variance, it cannot be granted by the Board of Trustees. I do have some question whether that's something that can actually be yours, but that should be contrasted with the parking waiver,
Right.
which can only be granted by the planning board. Also under the zoning code, if there is a particular use which is not within our parking sections in terms of use of property, the planning board is the entity that decides what the parking should be for that use. Those two things, if that's something that the board would be interested in, the responsibility for making that decision, that is something that can certainly be subject to review, and it may be with regard to variances as well. I just wanted to
Right.
make you aware of the difference.
Yeah, I don't want to go into the whole thing right now. I just want to, is that something, Frank, that we could put in for, consideration for the board in the future here? And not have it get into a whole big discussion or public meeting?
I need to defer a little to legal counsel, but the general principle is not to raise something now that is not in the public record. If it can be considered a new issue, I think you should defer that issue till after you adopt the plan revised as you want it. In other words, what we're talking about tonight is what's on the record that the public has seen that went through a public hearing that's been evaluated by the EIS. Now we're at the 11th hour in this where we need to fine tune what's in print now. If you raise a new issue, it raises real questions of whether you need then to have a separate public hearing. And it could keep going because you can always.
Well, I'm not raising a new question. I'm raising a new future issue. So can it be stated in the plan as a future consideration of the board? We're not saying we're doing it, but I want it noted that it's a future consideration of the board.
Yeah, I'm going to defer. I'd like to defer a little bit here to Stuart. I don't want to say there's a hard and fast rule here. I would say my answer to you would be the same answer I gave to Jaime Martinez, and that is you're free to raise this issue in the future. The comprehensive plan does not preclude you from raising another issue. And then what you would do with Stuart or with Jaime, as you get into that new issue, say it's a zoning issue or a parking issue related to the zoning code or to variances, you propose a law, then Jaime would do an EAF on that law, and then you adopt that law. In other words, there's going to be probably lots of things that you'll be concerned with in the future as things come up. But what tonight is about is actually responding to the actual plan that's in print. What's in it? Is it what you wish?
Okay, so then I have something for you that's actually in the plan.
Oh, great.
I told you I had two.
Okay.
Fire department related. The addresses of the actual apparatus and the companies. I don't know if you had that little block with all the addresses and stuff.
Yes.
They're correct as far as the actual companies are in that building, but it's not correct of where the apparatus is. Is that something that should be reflected?
The simple answer is it's up to you, I think. It's not necessary. No, most plans don't go into that level of detail. However, if this is important to you, you think it should be, we should put it in.
Okay, and the other part of that is the future north side firehouse. I think I would rather see that say future consolidation of the fire department, whether it's that building or another building or something like that, you know, but that I would rather not nail it down to one building. I think I'd like to see that as far as future consolidation of the Ossining Fire Department.
Okay. Yeah. See, there's a perfect one. That's in the plan. That's been, you know, the public's had a chance to see it and review it, and not revising it, tightening it up. And that's a perfect change we should make. We can make that.
Okay. I'm good. All done.
Thank you, Bob. Dana and Omar.
I'm good.
Okay. Dana?
Well, I had listed my thoughts in a memo. I won't bore, some of them were just historical stuff. I won't bore us with what all that was, but because only I care. No, but I mean, the word density kind of scares people, but I think what I'm wondering and what I'm thinking about is growth. And I know that we are poised to grow again. And it always, it makes me wonder what in 20 years will our population be? Is that anything that we can take a guess at? Or, you know what I mean? Like, how big will we be? And I call it, I said, are we a large village or a small city? Now it's funny, Peekskill grapples with many of the same issues we do. And they're also got a ton of apartment buildings on the drawing boards. And they're definitely gonna grow. So that's just something that I was wondering. I guess we have about 30,000 people now. Are we looking at being 35,000 in 20 years, 40,000? I mean, that's a big jump, but it's something a lot of people talk about and wonder, and it's hard to control that sort of growth, I suppose. But do we say in here that chances are Ossining is going to get bigger, the population in 20 years, over the next 20 years?
We do have, correct me, Sylvia, on this if I'm off. We do have a population, section. However, if the county did not make a projection, which I'm not sure that they did, we normally would try to reflect the Westchester County projection.
Yeah.
And we could, if you wish. I'm not sure that we reflected. It's not at the Ossining level, though. There's the only group I know that's made a projection is actually a group called NIMTIC. It's the New York Transportation group, and actually Urbanomics who's our affiliate for this, does population projections. We can take a look at what NIMTIC has projected. Their projections generally are, at the county level. So that may not help you. It would be difficult for us to, we do have a sense of your zoning now would remain very similar. We have said what the net result of that is, and it's very small. But it would be difficult to make a population projection, I think. Unless you're saying, Dana, that you might want to, I mean, some communities sometimes make a policy statement that they don't want, we haven't seen this recently, but that, you know, they don't, they want to set a goal for themselves or a target. You could do that. There is a population section. I think that one's a difficult, we can certainly get the projections that NIMTIC has made and Westchester County, because we have a population section. We talk about that.
Okay. I mean, it's kind of academic, I guess. It's just my own, it's just something a lot of people say, oh, we're growing so much, we're growing, where will we all go? The traffic is already so bad.
Yeah.
You hear that a lot, right? Now, that's kind of the way of humanity, I guess. But, something I'm kind of curious about. But I would also, I live in a T district. There seem to be 3 T districts, a larger one below Highland Avenue, the downtown Spring Street area, State Street, the area around Ellis Place, Linden, and St. Anne's, which is where I live, and then another smaller one off of South Highland. I know that we have made it easier for people to convert their home to 2-family as of right, which is what T stands for, 2-family, so that seems to make sense. But the language in the report said allowing 2-family buildings as of right will make it easier for new infill buildings to be developed and existing single-family buildings in the T district to be converted to 2-family buildings. This seems to indicate a concerted desire or effort to transform the T districts into 2-family, to make single-family homes in the T districts a thing of the past. Now, that can happen anyway. I mean, as ownership changes, we just made it easier for that to happen. Now, I guess, am I wrong? Am I interpreting this incorrectly? I mean, are single-family dwellings endangered in the T districts?
I think that I'm going to try to answer this. So the rules around the creation of conforming T district properties have not changed at all in terms of how big they need to be, the side yard setbacks, and everything else that has been done. So that really hasn't changed. There are some instances where in the past there was requirements for you to go to the planning board. Currently the code requires you to go to the planning board to get a conditional use. But the rules that would be implemented by the building inspector are the identical rules that the planning board would have to implement. And so, we have instances, Joe can tell you about it, where people are coming in, not just in the T district, but in other places where they're looking to adapt properties and they need to meet habitable space. So Joe has to go and look at the square footage of the new apartments and make sure that they're meeting those minimum sizes. And so the problem I think that has happened historically is that people haven't been doing that, and they've been building stuff, and there are instances where buildings were, for whatever reason, coming online without going through that proper process. So the truth is that at this point it's pretty hard to meet that criteria of those sizes, because the minimum size for lots and houses in the T district are still generally larger than the average T district property, right? And I know that everybody has different types of properties. I've seen your property in particular. I know we've spoken about it in the past, and it's pretty big, but it's not typical of most T districts. So, there's plenty of opportunities for people to convert them now, but the only difference is that they don't have to go to the planning board, but they still have to meet that heavy criteria. If they don't meet that high level of scrutiny, then they're going to get sent to the zoning board, where they would have to appeal for area variances, and ultimately go through a much more rigorous process where it's not guaranteed that they would even get that approval. So, you know, I would not say that single family homes are under attack in the T district. And I would also not say that the change from requiring that conditional use to allowing the building inspector to review it and determine, yes, it meets all the criteria, is making it much easier. What it is doing is it's allowing property owners to go straight to the building department, which saves them a few months, saves them a couple months in the process. But, you know, I've been here a year. I'd heard that there had been changes in the past, but in the year, the 13 months that I've been here, not a single application has come in for conditional use in the T district. The DGEIS does say that they do expect that there's going to be some changes, but there's just not a tremendous amount of opportunity, I think, in the T district to make these changes. And I don't expect that you're going to see this sort of overwhelming cascade of people looking to flip their properties and turn them from one family to two families. I just don't think it's reasonable to expect that at this time.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to echo that, you know, the process of, you know, saying that it's a conditional use and sending it to the planning board, you know, the planning board, when they look at conditions, it's almost the same thing that we would be asking the building department. Does the apartment that you're trying to create to make it to family, does it meet the minimum size requirement by the village code? Do you have enough parking? Actually, when it's in the building department, we would actually have even a more stringent standard, because it's not only meeting the village zoning code, but it would also have to pass the test of meeting all the state codes, which the planning board is not really up to speed on what those state codes would be anyway. So nobody would no one would be able to turn a one family into two family if they didn't meet all the local zoning code laws, and if they didn't meet all the state regulations for building code. And if they do not meet zoning code, like they don't have enough parking, the apartment is not, what they're proposing doesn't meet the minimum square footage for that zone district, which would be about 800 square feet, we would send them to the zoning board for variance, which is essentially what the planning board would have to do. If you didn't meet any of that, they just refer you to the zoning board. So this process is really just taking the zoning board out of the process of an applicant going there, spending the money to go to a planning board for something that actually is done in the building department. So it's not really changing the process. It's still the same. It's just that you don't have to go to the planning board to do this. You deal directly with the building department.
Okay. So
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, the biggest challenge you'll find with a lot of these properties, they're not even going to have the parking on site to make that application to the building department. That'll be the one thing that prevents it from even happening a lot of the time. So it's really only very large properties that have the ability to accommodate the parking on site, that have, you know, a really what would be, you know, a home that is probably going to be, you know, anywhere from 22, 23, 2,400 square feet already, at least, to make it, you know, large enough to split it to get to the, you know, what would be 800 square foot apartments on each level with 4 parking spaces on site and not in the front of the house, you know, properly located, not creating any, you know, side yard setbacks, not too close to the adjacent property line. So you still have to meet all that criteria. And that's a tough burden for a lot of these T-zone properties, which we know through our research are largely undersized.
And Jaime, thank you. And Dana, sorry to interrupt. So I have to jump off. So my question is, I do have a question related to the map and the zoning and the proposed stuff. Do you guys think that you guys are going to be here when I come back, or should I just?
But if we're not, number one, we could either insert it, or two, you could send it to them in writing and copy all of us on it. They're looking for macro direction today.
Okay, and that's part of. So just real quick, I'm going to throw it out. So the zoning map is part of this. Sure, we did look at the zones. So I would like to address or ask Simon or Frank or whoever may want to answer. So we know that, and I'm going to be very specific, Hunter Street, we have commercial and light industrial, but yet it's a T-zone. How are we addressing those issues in there when someone wants to improve their property? Because it's very difficult for them to do anything in there. Two, we have the PRD zone, which is along the side right next to Liberty Street and Hudson Street. We know for a fact that that was changed many years ago. We do have a light industrial section in there that a couple of years back, it was very hard for them to obtain their use back again because it was a residential use. So I don't see that anywhere how we addressing that. So I'm going to throw that out there. How do we solve that? You guys can come back. I have to jump off, but I'll be back in about 10 minutes or so. Sorry about that. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay. Thanks, Manny. Okay. I think I went around the gallery and it's my turn. So Dana, I'm super disappointed. I read your email. I would have read it word for word, but I can't. I don't like speaking for others. I thought the email was great, and I think it's actually worth sharing with the public because I think your sentiments actually matter. And the historical part I found interesting. I think others would too, but also some of your comments from the density to some of the other pieces. So I won't read your material out, although I refer to it in my notes, but if you change your mind, feel free.
No, I mean, the biggest thing I would recommend page 19, where you talk about Austin's growth having been powered by immigration. I really think we need to give more of a shout out to the various immigrant groups who have come through here. That it seemed a little rushed, and not just immigrant groups, but large influx of people, even from another part of the country, for example. So I think when we talk about our immigrant population, I suppose we're talking about our wonderful Spanish-speaking populations in Central and South America and Mexico, but you know, we're the result of waves of different types of immigration. I would very much, if you think of New York City as being where the wave crashes, right? But the wave runs ashore and it runs up here. So we get overflow from New York City. A lot of people who kind of start there make their way up here for what reason, right? So the one thing is I would urge, you know, I mean, I have some suggestions for language in there. And I also wasn't sure if urban renewal was discussed in any length. I don't remember seeing it.
I don't see that, and it's almost raised at every focus group that we do with anybody that's been here for a while or understands. That's why I was hoping you actually would read your notes, because I think it's important.
I think there has been not much discussion about urban renewal as a process moving forward. I think there has been some mention of urban renewal as being destructive to Main Street.
Right.
And so I would have to go back and identify the language, but maybe Simon or Frank, you can recall that. But I thought there had been some discussion that sort of referenced the damage that urban renewal had done to Main Street, which is part of why the form-based code is to sort of bring back that.
Trying to repair that damage remains to many people a goal, right? A big goal and a difficult goal.
I think that is definitely a stated goal of the form-based code in the downtown, is to bring back the feel that was taken away by urban renewal. So if we need to strengthen the language, of course, we can do that.
Yeah, Heidi's correct. The whole form-based code tries to get back to the form that you see like on the north side of Main Street, and replace the gaps that you have downtown in such a way that urban renewal is, if you will, healed a little bit, or as best we can. So yeah, it's the form-based code is as Jaime described. That's one of the purposes, to try to preserve the older architecture of Ossining in the form, in the basic form that it had.
And Jaime is correct. There's a few instances where we refer to urban renewal as a mistake, and that's something that needs to be repaired.
It's funny. You suggest maybe making Lower Main Street one way, going downhill, right? But if there's a new apartment building on the DPW site, would that still be, you know, sometimes it feels like there's suggestions made, but then we haven't thought to what we already have in the works, which is a big apartment building right down there. So how will that affect traffic flow? Would you still want that to be one way if you had, you know, 100 people living down there on that spot?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jaime. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that the EIS, I don't think looks that deeply at those potential impacts. So any change like that would need to be studied further through an environmental review process. And with the DPW site, looking like it probably is going to lead to that next phase now. If that's something that should be considered at that time, the environmental review for that project can potentially consider whether or not that should be reoriented in that phase.
Yeah.
But it's not something that is being, I think, considered at this point to be implemented.
Right. And Dana, just so you know, we were aware of the DPW site on our visit in the waterfront before. Well, actually, we had it's almost simultaneously in a couple of month period. We had come up with that. It's not actually. It's the idea of those two streets is actually in the 2009 plan, but we made a and so that one-way idea is there. What we did was try to keep Secor two ways, which is a little different from the 2009 plan, so that you could, when you're leaving the train station in the evening, you could go right out. But on the Main Street one-way down, I think that people at the DPW site are still going to be able to get out. There's two roads. I mean, Secor is one of them, but I think Central is also the other. So if I remember walking that all and saying to myself, yeah, I think this works. The one thing about a one-way, we don't usually recommend one-way streets. We're very, they tend to speed up traffic, and they tend to create more vehicle miles spent getting somewhere sometimes. But this one was so discreet, so evaluated in the 2009 plan. We felt that the one-way down on Main Street did make sense. And what was in our minds was to try to get a better pedestrian feel, be able to widen that sidewalk and perhaps get a bike lane in on Main Street. By making it one way, we don't need as much room as you do with a two-way street for traffic. So that was.
I do agree that Central Avenue is underused.
Yeah.
And, whatever we can do to maybe move traffic over there would be a good thing, because it's just a beautiful road. A lot of money was put into making it a nice road, and it feels like I hardly ever see anybody on it except the feral cats. So, but, okay, the other stuff was really more just affirmations of how wonderful your work is. And so, like neighborhood conservation preservation districts, I thought were a great idea. I also think that if we're saying that Ossining lacks a cultural anchor, the way Terrytown has the music hall, the way, especially these I do believe that the Sing Sing Prison Museum project, which is still, we're still working on getting site control of the powerhouse. That is a huge, huge deal. And that would be the cultural institution that we were looking for, especially with the social justice aspect of it that has become stronger and stronger over the past couple of years. And to me, a really big picture, the irony would be that this that has been here for 200 years, and that was so notorious that the village changed its name to separate itself from it. That then if we can then come around and turn that around and change and rewrite the narrative and make this a place where we look at criminal justice and social justice, how mass incarceration can be changed, how we can rethink how we incarcerate people, why we incarcerate people. You know, this to me would be a terrific achievement. This to me could drive a lot of things. So I wouldn't want to necessarily, now it's also a big if, still. Not a big if, but we have to get site control of that powerhouse somehow.
Yeah.
But you know, we do a lot online, we do a lot of webinar, we've been, you know, that is the most important thing that has to happen. That to me, when I'm thinking of 20 years out, that's what I think about. And of course, you guys have no control over that. But that to me is a very big piece of the puzzle. And I think it would be kind of a remarkable piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So that's kind of just how I want to close out.
Thanks, Dana. Okay, let me go through some of my points. I'll start with Dana's points because I wanted to make sure that her commentary, I didn't see it in the new rendition of things. So I didn't know because I think she had sent
correct.
it.
It's not in there yet.
Okay.
It might have been our fault.
It was sent to you a while ago, so.
Yeah, and Dana, that's our mistake.
No, it slipped through the cracks. That's okay. I'll get over it.
No, that wasn't the point. The point is I wanted to make sure that, you know, that's the point of tonight. I mean, it's all good. Since I then took my points and leveraged it off of hers, assuming you already had it. I just want to put things in context.
Have been addressed, so I'm not talking about the MF3 zones and all that. That we've been through that.
Yeah. No, we got that.
Right. So, I mean, the notion of neighborhood preservation and improving Austining without displacing our residents is super, super important.
Yeah. So, let me give you some of my comments that I wrote down. So, that I make sure I get it out there, and I can do a follow-up tomorrow and send it to you so you have it in writing. And then some of the smaller, some of these are just questions actually. So one of the things that I didn't get out of this, right? So this was a very comprehensive plan. I mean, I'm looking at what the town is doing. It's really just about environmental issues. It's like a third of one chapter of this you know, this is like 10 plus chapters. And it's not a judgment. It's people had asked us in the beginning, why aren't you coordinating the two plans? There's a reason. They're just not the same. However, they have the same title. So, you know, we want to be clear that this is very detailed, and kudos to all the people that worked on it. So I want to start there. There are a couple of words and comments that stuck out for me. So taxes. So there is commentary weaved in every chat, not every chat, but certainly in the zoning that talks about, you know, we look to ways to generate revenues. Revenues in the municipal world is taxation. And we sort of let it hang out there. I didn't find, and you can correct me, you could point me to it, you know, a correlation, a financial correlation between doing X and getting tax revenues after you discount the increase in the cost of services to that. So an example would be, you build, a developer comes in and builds a beautiful building with, you know, 100 units. That adds on the average of 4 people per unit, because some will have more and some will have less, but you can multiply it any way you want. I'll take 4. I'll take 3. So 3 times 100 is 300 people, 30,000 people in our community approximately. I would say that's probably what, 1% increase in population, right? So if you have a 1% increase in population, your tax base, you have a new building, you should get taxes from that. That should be relatively easy to calculate. There's no calculation that says another 1% to the population increases, you know, 1 police officer, increases the school in this way. The school has done this study of what it costs them. So that's a mathematical calculation, right? And then you could say you need, you know, another firehouse, or you don't need it. There isn't sort of a correlation throughout this entire document, except references to how we'll have not raise taxes, have more taxes if we do X, Y, and Z. and what that means financially to the village. Because we talk about taxes and we talk about stuff, and we don't talk about the expenses of an additional 1%. For every 1% that you increase, which is really every building that has 100 plus units, increases the population. It's not an organic growth. It is purely done as a growth of comprehensive plans that say we want more large buildings. So there is something to be said about these comprehensive plans and how they're read 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So I'd like you to look through the document with an eye to where did you describe a correlation, and we'll collect more taxes because it actually isn't validated in this plan that there will be an increase really anywhere except if you keep building up. And if you keep building up, at some point, you're going to have to also increase your services, which increases the cost at about 15 to 20% a year in New York at the rate we've been going, based on all the cost of hiring every individual, et cetera, et cetera. So that's sort of a missing for me, because next to the school, the number one issue in Ossining and the number one reason people leave is taxation. It says in the document, we are one of the highest taxed communities in one of the highest taxed counties in the United States. That the comprehensive plan clearly says. So we need to do balance. In light of that, and I'm not saying you didn't do it, I don't see it.
Yeah, can I maybe
Sure.
just add a real quick comment on that?
Sure.
So one of the things that we did throughout this process is we asked very early on for BFJ to do exactly what you just described, which is to take a 100 unit, random market rent of property and figure out how much it would generate in taxes, and then how much it would cost to service the people that live there and service that property. And that study was done, and I do believe it's in the comp plan. Correct me if I'm wrong, it's by Urbanomics.
You're right. That, Rika, we can share the whole study actually with you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it is in the, I think Simon has just brought this up here. Heidi's right. We were asked to take a look at particularly, but we took a look at all taxes, but particularly the school district taxes, because we were told that the school district was very, very concerned and actually had written, I guess.
Right, so you took a 70% out of 100% rather than 100%. That's fair. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. You're short about 28% because the school tax is 72%.
No, I think they did the municipal taxes as well. That was
You
definitely.
did. That's not what Frank just said. Okay.
I know he didn't say that, but
I'm
he
sorry.
did.
I'm sorry if I wasn't.
Oh, that's okay.
We took all taxes, but we
All right.
focused on the school district particularly because we wanted to be able to show this is work that we asked Urbanomics to do. And basically it is in the plan. We're trying to show here that the results of an actual statistical mathematical examination of taxes, they were fairly conservative. They did this on a per capita basis, which is the most conservative one to do it in terms of figuring out the cost to the village and the income that the village was doing. What a per capita basis means is just you're taking the population and you're dividing, when in reality, for instance, you would not need a new police officer or a fire truck or anything for 100 units normally. But the per capita basis assumes that there's a per capita cost, and it's a very conservative way to do it. But what this shows on 100 units of market rate residential is that you're actually going to get, all jurisdictions are going to get more in taxes than the services cost to render. Now, there's a caveat on that. For instance, we were very careful in talking with the school district. We wanted to know what their own internal projections were for students, because at some point, if you kept up a growth like this, would they need a new school or would they need new classrooms? And what we got, from the state education department was the school district's own internal study, which we have and we cite here. And as you know, or probably know, it projects a decrease in school children for the next 5 years, if I remember it correctly. I think it was about 132 students. So the school district is faced with a decrease in enrollment. So we think that if there's some modest growth, and by the way, we're talking very modest, but at 100 units, we took exactly your prototype, Rika, and we looked at it. And what it shows is a tax benefit to the school district without additional, that's a net tax benefit. That tries to take out the cost that they would accrue for educating those students against the income. And of course, the key to that is new type of market rate multifamily downtown, for instance, which would be on only a few possible sites. But if it did occur, it would be largely smaller units, and they have generally very few school children. And
Okay, so when they, thank you, when they did on the per capita, what is the effect of the requirements for affordable housing? How many units of market rate are needed to cover? Because part of the cost is affordable housing, right? So is that taken into account in the per capita? So if we add 1% of 1% increase in the population of affordable housing, because this is market rate, right? So where is that chart?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Good.
This is a new market 100 unit prototype. You're absolutely correct. I think we have a discussion here, it's brief, that if you add affordable housing to that at 10%, it will affect it. You're right, because the total tax revenue might slightly decrease and the total number of public school children might increase by 1 or 2. So it could affect it. The other thing that could affect it, of course, is if somebody asked for a pilot, payment in lieu of taxes. So what we took here to begin with, Urbanomics took, is you're just exactly what you said, 100 unit, market rate development. What would be the results of that? Now, there can be permutations of it. If for some reason it was all affordable, it would be different than market rate. If it were 10% affordable, we believe that the outcome would be similar. It would be a net positive. But if you get a development that has a pilot or something else to it, it could change this analysis. But we did try to do this. In other words, you asked a question.
I understand. No, I appreciate the question. And so the issue with data and this analysis, and if I could spend 24 hours a day on this, is that this is like a very interesting way of looking at things. What it doesn't do is what Dana brought up. It doesn't look at a very sort of simplistic way that most of our residents look at. You have 30,000 people. It's one of the most densely populated communities, short of the cities, as for a village. Kevin Dwarka's study was very clear about that. And it doesn't combine a holistic view of taxation. So it doesn't, which is what we live with, right? So if you have a 51% people living in houses and 49% living in apartments, and you flip that over in the next 10 years, which is what comprehensive plans are supposed to look at. They're supposed to not look at the past. They're supposed to look at the future, which is fine. So that's what they did with the school. But they're really, I could argue this for hours, but that's not my purpose. My purpose is that when you look at the community holistically and the level of density, and I think it was one of Dana's comments and one of mine about density, is that it's a very dense population. And you shouldn't look at an incremental cost only. You should look at what happens when you do X on this side, what happens to Y on this side. And that correlation, both in taxation and revenues, actually doesn't come through because it doesn't talk about both the 10% set-asides that we have as part of our code, and it doesn't look at the cost of increasing at 1% increments the population of a highly densely populated community in total. And we have a lot of co-ops and condos, and they pay totally different tax rates, right? Single homes pay predominantly.
Yes, they do.
Because, and you say that, so connecting the dots for me doesn't actually happen here. And And so I would just revisit some of the language about taxes and make some footnotes or comments that I think speaks more to the truth, because I think you need to have a very balanced view when you do comprehensive plans, rather than these sort of mathematical views of, well, look at market rate. Well, that's really nice to look at market rate housing at the prices that you have listed here. I'm not sure how representative that is of condos and co-ops and all the other stuff that we have and the percentage it makes up of the total. So that's my macro level. Like, I got this piece. I don't think it fairly represents. And when it's referred to as increase in taxes, I want to talk a little bit more about taxes. It was thrown around a little bit about the commercial viability. So, Tarrytown got lucky. A big pharmaceutical came in. It was small, it grew. They got lucky, right? It could have been another community that got a big corporation to come in and help with the tax base. We don't have a lot of space for large corporate environments, but I felt there was a lot missing in the commercial and the industry of really looking at this and saying, what can we do to bring in businesses? It didn't even talk about like creating like a mega center for fabulous restaurants, right? So it's not a complaint. It's just a little missing for me. And if it's in there, then I missed. I've read this thing 3 times, but it's like a really dense plan. So each time I read it, I find new things. So I don't see that too much about like serious new ideas about, except for the waterfront, of creating opportunities for businesses. Now, maybe it doesn't actually belong in a comprehensive plan. I don't know, but this is sort of my macro feeling about it. To maybe go back and see if there was more commentary. Maybe it just wasn't something the committee, you had a lot of people on those committees, came up with and said, yeah, this would be a great idea. People have said theater, people have said combine all the art groups. There are a bunch of little ones, combine them into one. Maybe it just didn't make it to the final plan. So I just ask that you revisit the opportunities from a tax perspective point of view on commercial. I had a question about commercial, which is that it says in the document that 36% of is commercial districts. So how do you define? Because most of them are mixed use, aren't they?
I mean, there are districts that, and there is a gray area there, you're right. Where it's not as gray, of course, if you industrial district, right. you have I think most probably consider downtown to be commercial. The easier one is, of course, the shopping center. Say, hey, that's commercial. In effect, downtown is partly mixed use. Yes.
It's almost, not all, but it's quite a bit. So I couldn't figure out from the charts. I don't know if you might want to revisit that and delineate, because if you've got a commercial area and you're not going to be able to change that, right? It's like, you're not going to, it's not enough space to do anything with. I thought it was a little confusing the way you guys did it, and maybe it's just a municipality. That's the way it's written. Those are the definitions. That's cool. But I thought in the verbiage part, it did really connect the dots that there might be limited, or we need to look at different things, or we need to look at restaurants as our key businesses. So we need to have wider sidewalks, that at absolutely every eating establishment has outdoor eating. So that the planning and zoning should be looking at that. It just didn't connect for me.
Those are 2 excellent points, and we made them. We made a big push on restaurants, particularly multi-ethnic. And when we walked around, Jaime, I'm going to credit Jaime with this idea, wider sidewalks, that's now in the form-based code. And you remember you were with us on the Croton.
Yep, I was on that walk.
We've got that in the form-based code to get all new development that comes in that form-based code now, and have to have curb to building 15 feet. So you would get.
And that to you is enough to encourage all the sidewalk cafes. Yes. I don't know. That's like the number that is needed.
Yes, we believe 15. Now,
okay,
would it be better? Could it be better for a sidewalk cafe? The restaurant guy would tell you, yes, 20 feet he would like more, or she would like more, but 15 works. Good examples of that. You actually have some good examples throughout Westchester. I'm just thinking, happen to be thinking, because I just ate there outside, is the Mamaroneck Avenue in the village of Mamaroneck. You'll see those sidewalks are wide enough.
I go through there all the time. And White
Oh,
Plains,
okay,
I think,
great.
did it also.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is good. It didn't jump out at me, but all good. Again, these are just, I had asked at a couple of meetings about passive houses and where it fits into the comprehensive plan, since we have the first one now in our backyard, but it didn't make it, I guess, to the plan. And I guess that would be considered something new.
No, I don't think so. I think Simon, well, I'm asking Simon, he's up on the passive housing, and I think where we talk about sustainability and building types, green roofs, and we should mention passive housing there. By the way, I'm not an expert in it, but we have just gotten the best passive development in Westchester County, as far as I know, is one we've worked on for the last 3 years, and it's in the little area of Fleetwood, and it's just being topped out right now. It is the best, the most detailed and the most advanced passive housing structure in Westchester County, I think.
But for this comprehensive plan, if somebody's sitting on a planning zoning board, it would be really cool to encourage that, because I don't think a lot of communities are. And passive houses, given our structures and and everything else that we have, I just didn't see it. These are some of the things that I just didn't see. And some of them I'm wrong about, and I'm okay with that. I could be wrong up to 5 times a day, and I'm not there yet. I think I'm up to 3. So I think we're still okay. The Kevin Dwarka study, which I actually was a trustee, I just want to comment that there was a comment. Let me see if I wrote down the page. Don't know if I wrote down the page. There was a comment about how the recommendations have actually not been fully made. That is not truly accurate. He had a number of recommendations. I'll get it in writing. I think that study is terrific. There are 2 points about that study that Kevin Dwarka actually made at a presentation. There were 3 key points. One, that we go sequentially, that we start at 1 and go through the rest of them. It was really important that we go sequentially. We didn't quite do that because a couple of things that some people wanted were sort of farther down the line. Be that as it may, it's actually a number of recommendations were done. So I would just appreciate somebody going back and looking at the actual recommendations. Secondly, the comments about affordable housing and units is a little bit misleading, in my opinion, the way it's written. So I'd like you to go back and just look at it, because the focus groups that were had and the commentary was not about affordable housing units, as are often described here, which for me implies apartments. It was actually about houses being single homes were becoming unaffordable in Ossining. That was actually the commentary, not the municipal view or, the zoning and planning view and like what a lot of you folks do for a living view of a definition of affordable, but actually it was about housing. Single home houses being unaffordable was the actual big comment, and help for single home owners. So I would just say, from a language point of view, for people that were involved in it, I don't believe that's actually an accurate description of what he described. And I do think that the village has actually accomplished some of his recommendation. I need to go back. I could have sworn, I'm looking at my sheet of paper, I could have sworn I wrote down the page number, but I don't see that I did. So I'm not going to go through that. Let's see where it is. Page 8. Oh, it says page 18, but I don't know in what section. I just wrote down the page as I went. Another sort of, for me, words are important. So there is conversations, and there have been write-ups about the word of areas that are underutilized, a property that's underutilized. So for me to understand what an underutilized anything is, I would wonder what an overutilized piece of real estate is. Underutilized to an environmentalist would be actually a perfectly utilized piece of property because nothing is being built on it. That to an environmentalist is actually a perfectly utilized. So the word underutilized for me, has a connotation that more needs to be done on that piece of property. It may be a term, just like road diet apparently is like a term that's actually used. I didn't know that. The connotation of a road diet is exactly the opposite of what you would think it'd be. So I would just do a word search of the word underutilized, because for me, it's actually quite judgmental. It's the same conversation that I agree with Omar Lopez about like illegal housing, or, they may be factually correct, but they're also judgmental about the word under, and I hear it all the time on these meetings. So I don't think that that's the right word to be using. I think that right sizing, or the right size of anything, is a more accurate word based on what you want to accomplish. So I would just ask that you look for it. Now, you may come back to me and say, yeah, we don't agree. We think it actually fits perfectly well. I'm not telling you to change. I'm asking you to look at it, because that's what I think the meeting is about. I totally love Dana's description of the immigration cycle. And I don't know if you use the word migration cycle. I feel like I'm back in college or in high school or something. But New York City is really what drives so much of the suburbs, and Ossining is no different from that. We're not unique in that sense. There's always been immigration cycles here. We're just going through yet another one, but 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, there was another cycle. It's totally normal, and should be embraced and should be looked at for the next 10 years. I would say, though, that what I found interesting is that there's also a migration from cities in Westchester, and I'm not sure that, and Dana probably knows this better than I do, I'm not sure the movement from people from Yonkers has been as great as it is now. And so it's also from within Westchester that people are moving to our area. That's more of a comment. It's not I just think that there's a lot to be said about how what matters here, and to look for the next 10 years, because it's sort of super important. Why do I say that? Not only about language issues and cultural issues, because it does change the landscape of the stores and the restaurants. For me, I live here in a great way. Works for me, like it, a good thing. It also changes a lot of the other aspects. So, for example, it's not just about food, and it's also about non-for-profits. Every time a non-for-profit comes in, it changes the shape of the environment. I think it's good. I just think it needs to be looked at. More importantly, it also talks about why people want to live here. So if you leave a place in Westchester that is very urban, because it is a city of 200,000, you wouldn't want to come here and live here for 5 years and then have this place turn into exactly the same environment. You'd have to sit there and say, okay, people move out of certain areas to come to small villages by the Hudson for a reason. So we have to be very cognizant of asking our residents why they're here, what brought them here, and what they want this place to look at. I know we do it every 10 years, but I actually think understanding some of the nuances are as important as understanding that as New York City thrives, so does Westchester. We're going through it right now. And I think it also changes how we look at our buildings. So one of the things, Frank, that you and I spoke about very briefly is with this pandemic, which you started this before the pandemic and you worked through the pandemic on this. Very challenging, super challenging. I don't know if the plan accounts for it, but people working in a more communal way, because they will most likely, there will be a significant number that will not be going back to the city to work, because companies in the city are going to be cutting back. It's in all the papers. It's all over. So how are we in Ossining planning forward, not reacting, planning forward to millennials who may be able to buy a small house in Ossining but need a work. I don't want to use WeWork because I don't want to promote or not, and I'm not sure it's the best example of communal working environments, but is that an opportunity from a commercial opportunity for us? Is that me asking for something totally new in the comprehensive plan and I'm too late to the,
No, I think we,
or is it something that you looked at and maybe it's something we should look at going forward?
Yeah,
Just an example of migration.
right, sorry, yes, okay. I think we touch on it, but we may want to revisit it and maybe emphasize it a bit more. We do say one of the things happening out of the pandemic is people working at home more. That's going to have a more lasting future coming out of the pandemic, we think. And I think
Yes, but if we're 49% apartments, condos, or co-ops, then we would be an ideal place for communal places that on the first ground, maybe for somebody being able to still buy an apartment or a small house here because they're able to work somewhere else. Work from home means that you need a bigger house than you thought you would because you need space to actually work and have an office. And most companies that I'm familiar with are already putting rules into place about working from home. Like you need a space, you need to use like they're going to make rules about it. So having a communal space brings in entrepreneurs into our village, allows people to still have a 3-bedroom or 2-bedroom of whether it's a house or an apartment because they have a place in downtown. Then they go buy coffee. I just don't know. I don't mean to get so detailed. I just didn't see it pop up.
Yeah, we can add on to that. I think we've covered a little of it downtown. We do mention that we want to create more spaces, particularly downtown, because of the pressure on the traditional retail and to have more creative use of space. And that certainly falls right into that. So we can take a look at it.
So I went a little bit all over the place, but that's because I was following all the different chapters and I was already beginning to wordsmith as I was doing my little Post-its. I finally had to print this whole thing out because I was trying to do that and then realized that's not really what you want. So I was a little over the place, but of course, I think the plan is in good place. I am upset about a few things like the parking. Bob brought it up because as we've gone through this process, I feel that the trustees were sort of told there's a process and you get to talk about what you guys really want to have input on at this and this point. Today, it feels like we're told, gee, this is not what you're doing today. You're reacting to something. It begs the question of, well, then when are we supposed to give our points? But aside from the parking issue, which I think there's some of us who have been here who feel that the parking isn't just going to be solved by building more parking, but the parking needs to also be resolved by a change in some of our rules and policies and laws. To your point, all of you, Simon and Frank, and Sylvia, that we could do separately. We don't necessarily have to, but I understand why Bob brought it up. And we'll do that separately. And there's a parking study being done, but I think the plan is terrific. I really do. I'm smiling on the inside. So, yeah, I do. I think it's great. I really feel even my points were not super major point. The fact that I disagree without a group of consultants did something is a personal opinion. I'm not here to, really, should I say that I'm smarter than the consulting company? I could say that. I'm okay with that, but it's not a fair statement. I can argue different points and I will, but not for this plan and not for this point in time. I have a right to disagree and argue, and I'm not going to be the only one. Trust me. The school board will tell you people come to them all the time and disagree with their stats. I would not be the first one, but to move things forward, I think this is terrific. And I think mine were really just a little bit more contextual. I like to put things in context. I wish that everybody we put on the board and the manager actually, I think, selects the land use boards, that they would read this, like with all the intentions, not just the laws that they then put into place, because there's so much that went into this that would be so valuable. Well, let's hope that that happens. But I thank you guys, and I thank everybody who worked on it. So I really very much appreciate it. And I hope this was helpful tonight, that you garnered some golden nuggets out of this.
This was very helpful for us, because I think now go into the plan. We've got, and Rinka, if you want to send us anything, and Manny, you're going to send maps tomorrow, I think.
I will, yeah.
Letter. So we can now try to get back to you. It'll take us, a few weeks to do that, but we can try to get back to you sort of, redlined copy where we make those changes. So that'll take just a little while. I think that the next thing before you, though, I want to assure Manny again that on the 19th, you have, I think it's the 19th, I'm saying this top of my head, but you have before you, and I believe that Stuart will do a resolution for it, and that's just to distribute the FEIS for the public, so the public sees it. But I'm sorry, the FEI, and you've got, we made all those changes, Manny. So if there's something on the map, though, if you send us anything, we'll try to make sure. Because I want to assure you that I'm going to say that Sylvia was very careful in making those.
No, of course, and just to kind of piggyback on what the mayor said. So, and I'm literally highlighting these areas, and that's the reason why I went back to our parking analysis that we have as part of the zoning. So, page 71 of the comprehensive plan, you have, it says other districts have the following minimum parking requirements for residential, and it names 1.5, 1.25, and 2 spaces. So it is part of the document. So it is part of the conversation. As soon as you put that, to me, opens the door for a bigger conversation, correct? I could be wrong, but as soon as you put that into a document, it becomes public, and it becomes a public information and a public discussion. So, but I'm gonna leave that for another time. You can clarify me if I'm wrong. And some of that stuff that the mayor also mentioned about the commercial and businesses, I'm highlighting that in the PDF, and I'm gonna send that document over because it's a little unclear. When I looked at the map, I see this light cyan or light blue, I want to say, of businesses that you call it, and businesses is less mixed residential, and it's like a big blue. It's like a big map, and I'm like, we don't have that many businesses, so it's a little bit unclear to me. How do we fix that problem? Sure, I know the zone, but I know it's like even Cincinnati falls under that category of business, and Cincinnati itself, we know that it's not a business; it's an institution.
Yeah,
you have another map like that as well. So I want to make sure that we are, correlating some of that stuff. But I'll mark the PDF and I'll send that over to you guys.
That'd be great.
With my notes that I have, and hopefully that will help. And that's pretty much it. I'm gonna put all that stuff in here as I go through again. I could not find my copy that I printed out. I just got back to work late this afternoon, and I must have left it upstairs. But anyway, not an excuse on my end, but I'll send that over to you tonight, and hopefully that will help. And looking forward for the next steps. But yes, I'll send all that stuff as well for the DGIS, for the maps too.
No, that'd be great. Yeah, the immediate next step is just the 19th on circulating the final environmental impact statement to the public, and then we need to get you a revised. We need to make sure that we get comments made tonight reflected in as best we can, and then get you a document. Certainly we'll hope the end of the month, so that we can get it out to you, and that you'll be able to make. I think there's no question on the findings now, the seeker findings, because I think the impacts of doing this, adopting the plan, are favorable. You've got a recommendation from the county, and you got a recommendation from your planning board. So you couldn't be in a better position, I think, seeker wise, and also from those two entities. So you'd be in a position in early June, maybe at your June 2nd meeting, to adopt the plan if you wish to, or adopt with any final revision or comments, editing of it. But we'll do our best to get the document back to you with a red line version reflecting your comments.
So, and again, Frank, I just want to be very clear. I don't want to take too much time. Obviously, like issues like parking in front, the beautiful diagrams that you guys have in here, those are going to be removed from this.
Those
right?
are not in the zoning proposal at all. We took them all out of the zoning. So
No, but that's what I'm saying, out of the document, because the latest document that we have in our website, it does show those parking.
no, those will
diagrams.
come out.
So all that stuff, MF3, everything that we have discussed,
Everything.
I want to make, again,
needed-
I want to be clear.
Yes.
That's what we,
And
I think that's,
you-
again,
that.
please, the rest of the board members, correct me if I'm wrong, is that what, at least that's what I want, and I thought that's what we all want, at least the majority of it. So just want to be clear that that's still the understanding from the board.
Yes.
We'll make sure of that, yeah.
Yeah, also, to understand why it's still up on the website and hasn't been removed yet is only because today
I
we
mean,
needed affirmation.
I know, yes, correct.
Right.
But now this is the time that I want to make sure that we clarify that again, that we want those items to be removed from the plan. I think
Right.
that's the feeling
Yeah,
of the
absolutely.
majority of the board.
That is
Okay.
abundantly clear to everyone.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a couple of points. These are quick points. One is in response to a point that you made earlier, Dana, with respect to the population and adding more information there. I think I'm interested in seeing the figures that you pull up, Frank. To me, my ears perk up when I hear that, because I know that there are folks that have specific agendas that a number like that, which is on its face, is just an objective number. It just says, here's the projected population of the village, and doesn't make any commentary about it, whether it's good or bad or whatever. And whatever numbers we add in there and we project, I would want to be super clear about where those numbers come from, what they mean, what the assumptions are, all those kinds of things. Because particularly now with COVID, we know the kind of migration patterns that have been happening from the early numbers with the census. The folks are generally leaving New York and the Northeast and moving south and some places west, southwest, like Arizona. But Ossining is not necessarily one of those communities. We would be the exception to the overall population change. And so I would just want to have like all those caveats and all that information in there as we add it, because I do think that it's interesting information to have in there and all that. That's number one. Number two is I want to respond to the mayor's point about, well, when are trustees supposed to give their comments? Because I can see where the confusion might come from, and I'll give my understanding of the situation is that during the public comment period, we were told, hold on your comments because you'll get a chance to comment later on after the public comment period. And then during this comment period, which is for the trustees, we're told, you can make comments, but it shouldn't add in new things. And so that way, for that reason, it can feel a little bit confusing. My understanding, going back to the beginning of this process, this is a comment that I made actually during committee meetings that we had for the comprehensive plan, where I said, I don't want to wait, and you'll remember this, Frank, I hope, and it's all recorded and on YouTube. I don't want to wait until the end for trustees to sit down and have to take hours and hours to review this for the first time and have that be the first time that they're engaging with it after all of this has been kind of baked in, because they won't have the opportunity to then get their ideas vetted in the same way that these early ideas are. And so to specifically address like when were trustees supposed to put in their ideas of like, we should have a carousel downtown and we should like all of whatever the idea is, it's like when the drafts were being put together so that the trustee ideas and anybody else's ideas could be part of what then would get reviewed by the public and then confirmed by us at this stage. In many ways, I feel like, although I did say it, I wish I said it more of, okay, like the draft of the first 3 chapters are out. Please read them, see what's in there, give your comments. You will remember that I said things like this because like your comments are important. And I don't think that I underscored. It really matters that you get them in now, because if you wait until the very end, they won't have the opportunity to get publicly vetted and won't be seen in the same light. if we could do it all over again, I can't wait for the next, in the next 10 years, I'll be, I'll be so ready for the next one. Yeah, but until then, it's like lesson learned. Like that was really the point to underscore.
Yeah, but I was very happy that, you know, from the first moment this started, actually from our interview, but the first moment it started, that both you and Manny were on the committee, you know, so that you could go on, were at the committee meetings, you were able to participate, so that you could make comments, and I think it's fair to say you guys did.
Right. It's why I have so few comments tonight and during this step of the process, is because I've seen all of this language many times before for the last year and a half.
Yeah.
So I just want to add to everything you said, Omar, yes, and not actually what happened, because there were a number of meetings, and the commentary is not to worry, you'll have time later to do that. So I didn't worry. And for those of us aren't, and Manny wasn't always on this, Victoria was, he came in a little bit later, he was on different parts of it. And so, yeah, in 10 years from now, you know, at the end of this, what we really should do is comment separately on how we think things could be done differently and better. And I would say that about everything in life. You could always go after the fact, after everything you do, and say, how would I have done it differently, better for the next group, or if I'm part of that group. I don't have any ill feelings. There's no anger, there's nothing. I mean, however it gets there, journeys are always tough, and the five of us simply cannot be on every committee. This was not the only initiative going on, in addition to a pandemic. But everything you said, and not quite sure that is how the trustees necessarily understood it in more than one occasion. My recollection is more about being told, don't worry, your turn will come. That's not actually how it should have been said or done. And some things were taken in and some things weren't. And unfortunately, when you're a trustee, I think because it's every 10 years, and by the way, most municipalities don't even do it every 10 years. Let's be honest. We're good at this. This is great.
That's right. You have a good
This is really great. And it's, you know, kudos to the staff for putting it together. I mean, this is great. So no complaints. However, you know, many trustees don't go beyond the 10-year period. So it's always a new set. So it would behoove us to do a couple of something, a write-up, a one-pager that says for the future boards as a learning from this. That's what my takeaway is from this. But
Mayor,
we're not done with this yet. You know, there's plenty of opportunities here.
If I could say one thing,
all good,
all of you, about that, it's very important. One of the recommendations in the plan, it's not just to think of this 10 years out. It's to think of it and help use the committee. Remember, we recommended in the plan that use your steering committee maybe a year from now, and don't view this as engraved in stone. You can update it. You can update it. You don't have to New Jersey calls these selected updates. You can do that every year. You can do it whenever you want, actually, but we suggested in the plan that have your committee remind you of what the key issues are next year, and you might want to make selected changes so that it's a living document rather than, you know, so that you don't have to wait 10 years. That's my message.
Yes, poor village manager over there in my gallery is going, oh no, don't make me hire a consultant every year.
No, I didn't mean to hire anybody. I think Karen knows because we've talked.
I'm kidding, Frank. I'm kidding.
Yeah, you okay? Yeah.
Well, you know, one of the benefits.
It's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the benefits
you could do that with
treating
Jaime. That's why you have a plan.
Treating it as a living document is helpful. I think advice here, because we're going through this big EIS process for a full comprehensive plan, but where you make amendments to the comprehensive plan, you don't necessarily need to go through that level of review. It could be as simple as we're going to change a section, we're going to do the EAF, and we're going to treat it similar to when, you know, people come up and they want small zoning changes, things of that nature. So it's not that level of environmental review to change the plan throughout the process. So it really, a living document is the best way to consider it. And I know we've had that discussion about this as a living document, and in some ways it's not, because it's like you're passing it and this is what it is. but it is changeable over time. Because things really do change. I mean, you know, if you had a comprehensive plan that passed in 2019, you probably never thought of COVID. And those people are going to have to go back and come up with changes to that. So.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I think we're learning from this, and I would have liked, it would have been nice to have something even from the last time that they did. So good for us. We'll figure it out, and we'll do it for a few years from now, and we will have to think about how we want to update either chapters or whatever, so that the planning and zoning boards who might refer to it or developers refer to it, and I've seen them doing, you know, in your thing about this and that. This is what your board wanted. This is what the plan says you want. Therefore, that's what we're presenting to you tonight. So we do want to stay on top of that. So I appreciate that. I think that we can move on, village manager. I don't know if you have something to add to this conversation. I didn't even ask. Do you have something to add, or Stuart, or anybody else, Kevin or Joe, or anybody else in the gallery that wants to add to this tonight, to this conversation, or did you want to move on, Karen?
If any of my colleagues have any comments, please go ahead. If not, I just would like to thank everybody. We have spent a long time on this. This project actually started, the comprehensive plan started a week before I got here with public engagement meetings, and that was almost very close to 2 years ago now. So it's been a long process. I want to thank everybody on the committee, everybody who participated, the board, the staff, our consultants. It was a very interesting process, a lot of dedication, a lot of collaboration, a lot of great ideas, and I look forward to doing it again in a few years. So.
Okay.
So it's a work session.
Stuart, did you want to say something too? I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
So work session. So you're.
Yes. So next up, we are going to have Chief Sylvester and Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahan talk about our local law 4, which is towing. And we've been talking about this at a few other meetings, and we're going to be continuing that conversation now.
Thank you, everyone. Hi, Chief. This, in a sense, like the comprehensive plan, continues to be a work in progress. It seems like it's been taking 10 years. It has not. I did want to just bring you up to date on and I'd sent some memos around, and the chief was kind enough to respond to some of the points I raised. I have only heard from 2 of the tow companies. So many of the questions that I have raised really require input from the companies, but without input from a lot of them, some of these are issues which ultimately are going to be, you know, board requirements. But let me just sort of deal with a few things. One deals with the storage facility where the towed vehicles will be kept. The proposed local law has that it would be kept in a secure facility. Most municipalities, both towns and villages in the state, define that to be a fenced-in facility, generally with a fence that's 6 feet tall, that can hold a designated number of cars, as few as 6, some go up as high as 20, but a facility that is secured in that sense. It is a gated facility. Some require an indoor facility as well, but if we can just talk about the secured facility. And I raise that because my understanding is that 2, possibly 3 of the companies that do towing in the village, and Chief, please correct me if I'm wrong, only 2 or 3 may provide such gated or such secured facilities. And so the question that I think it's important for the board to discuss is that a requirement in terms of such a secured facility that they want to put into the current code or into the code? We do have it in the code as it is now. My understanding, though, is that not every one of the companies that currently tows within the village would be able to meet that requirement. So I think that's an important thing for the board to basically decide on, so that we know what we can do. We have it in there now, but again, and we don't define what is meant by a secured facility. But as I said, most municipalities do define that as a gated facility that is locked, and with the size of the fence and things like that. I don't think you have to get that micromanage it that much, but many municipalities have that. But in terms of what do we mean by secured? Is it to be a gated facility? Does it just mean that they can put their trucks in front of where the cars are so people can't get them out? That's something that I think is important. And that plays in hand with the requirement that the particular facility must be consistent with the village's code, meaning the zoning code. It must have a CO, those particular requirements, which is in the proposed local law. But again, something that I think it's important for the board to provide advice on before we can come in with really a finalized version. So that's really the first topic. Then there are some that flow from that. Hours of operation. Both Mr. Nolan and Ray Oakley have given me their hours of operation. Both operate Monday to Friday, generally from 9 to 4:30. Another question deals with what kind of, how do you pay for it? Mr. Oakley does accept credit cards. Bob Nolan does not accept credit cards for impounded vehicles. He pointed out that for vehicles that are in accidents that are brought to his facility, generally that's done through insurance. But again, that's something that many municipalities do mandate that major credit cards be accepted. The city, for example, does. So when I say city, I mean the city of New York, but many other municipalities, both towns and villages, do as well. That's again something to be discussed. But as I said, Ray Oakley's company does accept credit cards. Bobby Nolan does not with regard to impounds. So that's again something that I think is important to determine, because I don't think the point is to basically have companies that cannot meet certain requirements that they already from the businesses that they do. But I do think it's important to just have that. So I thought that would be at least where we could start. There are some other issues to bring up. Mayor, I know you had mentioned the issue of an audit, the ability to check that out. That goes into sort of record keeping because many departments, many municipalities do require that each towing company keep records of the tows. And so those records can be checked by the police or by someone that the village determines it to be appropriate to check. The city of New York is the only one I came across that has what's called a towing bill of rights, which is something that's actually given to people on scene. And it basically says, it does not have to be, the facility where it's being taken to, you don't have to get it repaired at that facility. Neither that facility nor your insurance company can tell you where it's got to be, where your car has to be repaired. Things along those lines. The city also has an interesting provision that if the vehicle was involved in an accident and the person who was the owner of the vehicle was in fact injured and was taken to the hospital, you don't have to, that notice has to be given to that person within 24 hours of the accident, not necessarily obviously right at the scene if they're not there. But the city has that sort of bill of rights, which is actually a printed document that is handed out. Other municipalities also require posting requirements in terms of what the fees will be and what has to be posted on the side of trucks with regard to things like that. But those are little, those are sort of, I think, somewhat secondary to the issues of what kind of facility do you want these vehicles stored at? How should it be secured? And I thought, if we could start with that, because again, it's interesting that if you look at the towing legislation throughout the state, you find most of it is actually Nassau, Suffolk, Orange County, a few in Westchester. You don't get it too far going west. One of the few I found was Johnson City, and has one, and that sort of answers a question that I think Trustee Fritchie had, which is about AAA. They have a specific exemption that it doesn't apply to AAA vehicles, so they can come in and do what they want to do. But I throw that open to the board now, and if they have any questions that either I or hopefully the chief can answer, please. And Chief, if there's anything that I said that was incorrect or anything, please feel free to correct me at any point.
No, I think I'll leave it for board questions.
Okay. Questions, comments? All righty. Let me ask, I've gotten calls for like 2-3 years ago. So, and I've said this before, the common questions I get are that there are no price lists. So the piece that may be from a legal perspective, not the most big ticket item here, is the one I get most calls about, that it isn't clear to a person how much you're supposed to pay, how that's derived, and how they're supposed to pay, because they don't see it. And when they call the desk at the police department, they get different answers. Don't really know. You'll figure it out with the towing company. They'll tell you, et cetera, et cetera. So not to say that these are all proven to be true comments. These are the comments I get, because I rarely get calls unless it's about somebody needing a problem solved, right? So I would only be getting people who are unhappy with the way things are working. I rarely get somebody who goes, my car got towed at 3 in the morning, all good, I paid my $300, have a nice day. I don't get those calls. So the communication to the public, whether it's posted on the website, etc., is actually a big deal for the public, because it's about how one deals, whether it's our own residents or people that are visiting or driving through. So that actually is the number one thing for me that I get complaints about. I have gone a couple in the past year, a couple of the year before that, and before that, about the fact that it would be good if we also did those price lists and information in Spanish. It's sort of difficult to understand what you're supposed to do. You get up in the morning and your car is gone, or you're in an accident and your car is gone, whatever. These are, when your car is towed for whatever reason, it's never a pleasant moment. So people are already under a lot of stress, and they're nervous, and they need to get money, and they don't know, like, do they take credit cards or not? So communications, to me, actually is a big deal, because it's an anxiety-ridden transaction. So that's number one. Number two, Stuart, thank you about the whole fencing issue, because I think the chief actually brought that to our attention. I don't know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe, when he brought the whole towing conversation to the forefront in the first place. And it sort of didn't go from there, but truthfully, it was brought by him and said, like, we haven't looked at this for 20 years, and here are some issues. So on one hand, I find it odd, because we've been using, you said Nolan Towing is the one that told you they don't have the fencing?
No, what Bob Nolan said to me, I apologize,
Yeah.
was that he thought that only 2 of the 5 had essentially secured facilities.
And he's one of those 2? No.
Chief is indicating no.
Okay, so he's been doing it for 20-something years, right?
I don't know when he got in business. The reality of it is, of towing in this village, like many, many other things, is that they operated under what was sort of common practice standards for a lot of years, and things worked, so nobody ever fixed what wasn't broken. Things have changed. And, your local tow yard, they'd put a car back there and nobody would bother with it. But I can tell you, over the course of my career, more than once, I've heard of somebody trying to either steal their car out or take property from it. you know, the issue we have is that when a tow company takes custody of a car on our behalf, not towing as part of the rotational list, quite frankly, we don't really care what they do with that because they're simply providing private service on a rotational basis. We're providing a service to someone, an access to a service where they're impounding, they're acting on our behalf. If you're impounding a car and you're holding it until we give it back to somebody, you know, we have an obligation to ensure that that car is held so that there's not vandalism from another person, that the person who's been arrested doesn't go steal their car back. You know, we've gotten by for a long time, like many other things that we do. When we talk about police budgets, I say all the time, we squeeze it in somewhere, we make it work. It's the Ossining way. Sometimes the Ossining way is dangerous, and you know, we really get by being lucky. Now, I know that the tow companies themselves are the ones who raised this issue of secure lots. They've also acknowledged that none of them is trying to put one another out of business. And I know that based on geography, for some people, this would be very, very challenging, which is why what I had said originally when I pitched this was, this is industry standard. From my position, I'd have a hard time saying that we shouldn't require people to have fenced lots, but I also understand that if this requirement goes in, there are some people who may be in a position to say they cannot do it. When we say one person has a fenced lot, one person has no fenced lot, but a brick and mortar place of business, we have one person that just has a fenced lot, and you call on a cell phone and they show up. So I don't know that all of our tow companies are doing all of the things. I think we get a little bit from this one. Some person does one piece better, another person does another piece better. I think we have some real challenges for how the businesses are handled. But if we're creating a standard, I think we should really hold to the professional standard. That's my opinion.
So you think everybody should have a fence?
I mean, objectively, if you ask whether or not we should keep cars that we've taken custody of in a secured facility, it's hard not to say yes. But I also understand that a board of trustees put in the position to say, if we do this, somebody can't do the business anymore with us. You know, it's a problem. So if there's another way that it can be accomplished, fine. From a police department perspective, it's hard for us to bend on that. I understand that the board may have to take a different position for reasons of trying to support local businesses.
Okay. So just help me out. On an average, do you think it's like 2 or 3 cars a month are being held somewhere for a month? 2 weeks, 30 days, a week?
You know, I provided an awful lot of stuff to you before. It took a really long time to go through. I couldn't possibly answer that.
No, that wasn't on there though. The answer to
I know
that
that, but it wasn't. That wasn't a request. So.
I only asked this because what I heard Stuart say is that the lot has to have a fence. It seems to me it would be a lot less expensive if on the average you had 2 or 3 cars at any one time that you could fence in a portion, because you could use that fenced-in area for other cars that you're working on. It doesn't have to be just for but it would be a lot cheaper to take 2 or 3 spots and put some sort of a fence around it that could be locked and people can't just jump over than it would to take your entire lot. So I'm just trying to come up with solutions to keep that professional level that you're talking about. If you said, for example, on the average, they're holding on to about 6, it's really spaces, 6 cars on any given time, we would then say you need to have at least 6 spots fenced in on your property. Or we could say it could include the indoor part if you have a brick and mortar, because that too is secure. So I'm trying,
I think the challenge,
none of us are experts, so I'm just having a conversation.
Nor am I, and I think that's really the issue that we're having right now is a lot of what we're trying to do should be answered by industry experts, people that are actually towing the cars, and they should say, because one of the things that we're not really going to have easy data on is we tow a car, we impound a car, how many cars on a rotational tow get left behind? Because there are people who will have their car towed and they're just not coming back. They'll let the tow company, eventually when the fees exceed the value of the car, they place a lien on it, it goes to auction, and that's how the tow company recovers their fees. So I don't know how many cars that are rotational that get left on the lot. Some impounds are picked up like an hour later, some impounds are picked up the next day, some take several days. That's a hard one. There is no report in our system to provide that. We'd have to hand sort that data as well. But I really think ultimately this is a question that needs to be answered by the tow companies. And unfortunately, they're not all really responsive to this. But I think that's sort of evidence of how the rotational list works. Some of the companies are very, very active and others are when it's convenient for them. Okay. And honestly, I feel bad because this is really going to impact them. So it would be great if they'd participate. But I know that Stuart has reached out a number of times. And if they're just not interested, I don't know how much more we can drag them to the table.
Okay, fair enough. I don't want this to be just my conversation. So somebody raise their hand if they have something else. But my solution, because we'll never get out of this, and it will be 10 years that we're discussing this. Look, we haven't looked at this in 20 years. We've gotten complaints about this, and it's more than a couple. So there are three parties involved, right? There is the towing folks, there are people being towed, and there's the police department is also involved in this, as far as the transaction. The police department's here to discuss. People have complained. Towing companies seem to be very concerned about, I think, pricing more than they are about some of these issues. So you put a stake in the ground. I would suggest a remedy. I would then send it out to them and say, we may not have gotten input from you, but this is what we're going to do. We're going to hold a public meeting. If you don't show up, this is what you're going to be obligated to do. That might, get a response, because otherwise, I don't think that we're going to hire experts in the field of fencing around towing company lots. These guys have been doing it for a long time. They have to have an interest in their own business. They may not realize we're talking about fencing and all that. They may think that what we're really interested in is the rotational list and the equity around that, how it's going to get communicated, and pricing.
Well, so from a big picture perspective, I think if you want to fix this problem, here's the things that we need. Number one, the tow companies need an increase in price because they're 25 years ago rates, and it's really not fair to them to be undercharged. In exchange for that, and this was their pitch right from the start 6 years ago when we started talking about this, is that they should be more strongly regulated. And we've talked about making sure we know who's driving the trucks if they're driving on behalf of the village. The issues of pricing and posting, I suspect that a large part of that gets fixed by setting the rate at something that's reasonable so that we don't face people trying to squeeze extra money from different places out. But then the way that we ensure that is, I think it should be posted at the tow company. We can hand something out if we need to, but the reality is that when they go to the tow company, that's where it should be required to be posted. It can be inspected. If it's not there, then we have reason to remove people. And ultimately, that's the last piece that we need. We need a consequence for when people don't cooperate. A few different things. If you look at the data we sent, there's a number of companies that don't answer the phone, or they only answer it when it's very, very convenient. And while that's fine, that's one business model. When we need a tow truck, we need a tow truck. There was one company that last week we called, and after an officer sat out on Route 9 in the middle of rush hour traffic for 15 minutes, called back, and the company said, never mind, we changed our mind, we're not coming. Now we have to call somebody else, start over again, get them out. It's at the end of the business day. They might not be in their shop anymore. Those kind of delays, it's not really for the convenience of the cop. We're trying to free up traffic at rush hour, make sure everybody has a way to get home. Also, the person who's, sitting on the side of the road can get on their way and go where they're going. So, if there's a consequence to, taking a call and not showing up because you're also taking business away from another company that may have taken that, that allows us to keep people on a strict behavior type thing. If they're overcharging, a simple consequence, remove them from the list. Obviously, there's price gouging and stuff and consumer protections that we can always consider. But I think that the real remedy first is where we see minor infractions. Things like a warning letter, a suspension, and then removal from the list are the consequences that we really need to be able to take. And there wasn't really a mechanism for that before. So I think set the prices, set the standards, give us the consequences. We can clean this up easy. The rest of it is, I think, a lot of messaging. The one thing that I'll offer to the board to consider is, while I wholeheartedly agree, fine, post the prices to the website. There's no reason things like that shouldn't be there. What I see over time is every time we have a question from somebody, their recommendation is always, it should be posted somewhere. Really what we have is these are things that are already posted somewhere, albeit in a complex mechanism being in the fee schedule. As we keep extracting things and then posting them somewhere else, we are eventually overwhelming people. We're trying to simplify, take something out of something and post a simplified version. We just have to be careful about where we post all these things and how much we throw at people, because eventually we end up with 1,000 different tabs on the website, and it's no more easy to find than it was before. But I think that there's easy ways to get this messaging out, have it posted in the tow companies. We talk about it a bit, definitely have it on the website. And I think that as long as people know what, and then a place that they can come back and complain, just clearly to state, look, if you think you've been overcharged, you've got to come back to us and let us know. And then we have the consequence to be able to the teeth to be able to go after people like that.
I'm glad you said that. Where do you think that place should be?
I mean, it really should be with us. If we're managing the rotational list, it should start with us. Let me say this. most complaints that go on in any private or public business start with a manager somewhere who goes and looks into something and generally deals with something. If you have a more formal complaint process, certainly I think it should start with us, because there's then the board always as a next level for a hearing or something like that. But, you know, if we're managing the companies, our officers are going to be the ones that know what goes on. They have the relationship to understand what the tow companies are doing, who works there. But quite frankly, if there's a complaint, it's not my passion, settling tow complaints. So I don't really care who takes that on.
Okay, but we should figure that out. I don't know if I've seen anything else. So, all good ideas. You know, this is what we're doing here tonight. So it's called a work session. Stuart, I have 3 more locations of prices that somebody dropped off. I was supposed to send this over to you. I'll drive over in the morning and I'll, you know, there's 3. I'm not copying this. It's
That's fine, Mayor. Thank you.
but it gives you 3 pricing strategies from different communities, and you can call them up, and they
Sure.
might even tell you that they have how people can complain and follow up and all of that. So like all of the ideas that the chief has, we're not settled with the fence. I think we just have to sort of approach it and say, unless somebody objects, I mean, we gotta do something, or we're gonna be going around circles. So I do think we don't want, go ahead.
Sorry, the one thing I want to add about pricing is just that, and you know, again, I really wish the tow companies would come to these meetings and tell you these things, but from the feedback I've gotten over the years, one of their major concerns, and look, I don't know this, but I suspect this is what we're seeing from people that have been overcharged over the years, is that they're overcharging because they're not getting the rate that they think that is deserving to them. That's usually what people do. They cut corners. The reason, it's not just that they're looking for a larger rate. They're concerned, from what they've shared with us, about things like additional equipment. I'll give you an example. Last year we had a car that went off of 9A and into the swamp, and it was waist deep in there. And it took 2 tow trucks, and it took them like 40 minutes to pull this thing out. And at the end of the day, that's a $100 tow job. It took 4 tow truck operators, 2 tow trucks, and they did it for $100. It cost them money to go out and do that job. So what they were looking for was that job they should be able to bill for in some mechanism. I don't know that it's double, but they should be able to bill for a second truck to come out. Likewise, when you see 2 cars and they're parked, sort of parallel parked, and everybody's New York City style, you know, nose to bumper, how do you get that car out? I was amazed the first time I watched them do this. They sneak dollies underneath and pull it sideways. Those dollies are expensive, and there's a lot of liability involved in pulling cars like that. Likewise, we all drive all-wheel drive cars because we live on a giant hill in the middle of the winter. When those cars don't have keys in them, they're dragging them, and there's the possibility of damage to the car. There's a lot of liability involved for the tow truck operators. So, you know, they had a menu of things that they had talked to me about years back, and I know that Stuart's acknowledged a lot of these things for sort of ancillary charges that they would want to tack on for things. I wish they'd come out and tell you what those things are and how much they think they should be paid for them. If they're not super interested in it, then maybe we can't do it. But that's part of what the problem that I'm hearing from them is, that they're doing all these complicated tow jobs that go beyond just like, hey, we impounded your car, keys are in the ignition, no problem, roll it up on a flatbed and take off.
Fair enough, but when people don't come forward and we are changing this, we take our best shot, and then people come say, how could you only charge $50 when you should have charged $53? And my answer is, well, now that you see it, let us know that it should be $53. But right now we got nothing to show. And I actually don't get the sense that towing companies are just complaining about that. I actually look at I'm much more focused on residents. And to be honest with you, it's that people have, unless you get towed a lot, people don't really have any clue what it's supposed to cost. So I go back to the fact that you actually do have to let, so and if they have to bring money, so I haven't forgotten, Stuart, that you asked about credit cards. If they actually have to bring money, then they clearly need to know, not when they get to the towing company. They actually either have to call, you know, the police, and the police has to be able to say, this is the price list, or I'll send it to you, or this is where you can look at it. So it is actually important, and putting things in a place that somebody can look at a search and just search for, I got towed, what do I do, would be really easy to do. So we should nail down some pricing, And the fencing, I'm going to go with the idea I had before because nobody else is arguing for something different. So I don't know where to go with it except to put something down.
I haven't had a chance to get in here, so.
Oh, sorry, Bob.
That's okay, but you know,
I said raise the hand because I didn't know, nobody seemed to have anything before. Go ahead, Bob.
Just about the impounds. I mean, they're impounding for the village, correct? Am I understanding that right? Right.
Yes.
Okay, so I know it's probably not logistically something that could be done, but should we consider a village impound lot? Where, I don't know. It's something that, you know, put a fence up, put around it. The drivers or the tow companies have the key to it or the combination to it, and they put it in there, and it's a village lot because, again, that impound in their property is another liability to them, correct?
Yeah, the problem is that so we've kicked this idea around for a long time. Before 25 State Street was built, there were some savvy cops who figured out how the village could make some money on impounding cars. First and foremost, we try to keep the police department try not to focus on revenue as the motivator, right? We're not interested in impounding cars, take people's money, so we try not to focus on that, but we have an obligation to take cars in certain instances. I don't think the village has real estate for it. I think there's complications with the vehicles that get left behind that people won't come back and get, and then we've got to be dealing with auctions. It's a convenience for village government to be able to have contractors come and do this because it saves us a lot of trouble. I also don't know how the tow companies would deal. There'd be a maze of payment at that point where if they pick up and they're merely dropping the car off, then how do they get paid? We have to create a voucher system to
right
the tow companies. So it would certainly complicate the process if we did that.
Oh, good.
I think primarily we don't have the real estate for it.
No, I don't either. It's just bounced off my head and it bounced right back at me. But the credit card thing, you know, who carries cash? The more I see the society we're in right now, nobody carries cash. I take cash out of my pocket. They look at me like I got three heads. I say, how do you not carry cash? But your average person deals with a debit card or a credit card. And if they're going to work for us, and they need to be able to take credit card payments on whatever it is. That's my opinion.
I should point out one thing on that, if I might. What some municipalities do is that they will not accept, they will allow the tow company to only accept cash for impounds. But if it is towed for another reason, be it an accident or whatever, you can have a different kind of, you know, credit card or whatever. Because the theory being, and particularly what other municipalities do, is that if they're impounding a car that has no tags, then the view is the only way you're going to get it back is with cash, because they are not going to just take it, you know, because they don't know who's going to come in basically with regard to that.
Right.
So that's, I just make that point. I just think it's something should be in there to that effect in terms of, you know, how you want to, you know, what you want to accept. As I said, Bob Nolan says that with regard to impounds, he will not accept credit cards. He basically says, listen, there's an ATM just down the block and they can get it from an ATM. You know, his experience has been that if someone's been impounded, they're generally ticked off at him. And if they do it as a credit card, they'll immediately turn around and they'll dispute a charge. So he does not want, you know, he just doesn't want a credit card for that. Oakley.
I don't know how disputing charges works, but the reality is I think that one of the reasons you may get resistance right now is, again, if the fee is very, very low and they pay a 3% market rate charge on it, you know, for every car you impound, you're losing 3% because you pay the credit card fee as the vendor. That may be part of that. And I imagine that would be a little less of a problem if the fees were market rate.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Bob. Were you gonna say something else? Okay, so again, because we have basically two companies, we just have to look at rates that others are charging. If we need to increase it, I think even the municipality charges 3.5% on credit cards, common practice. So you could add that in. I think people do need to have the, I mean, you know, the world is just moving. So I think that you do need it. The disputes actually do work, that if it's disputed, he won't see his money for quite a while. The pricing, I think we can do. The credit cards, we resolved. The fencing, we sort of discussed either brick and mortar and or a fenced in area. You know, and they can come back to us and say, we got it wrong. Too big, too little, we can't afford it. Maybe with the new rates we can, because we don't have much to go on. I think the intention here, both from the chief and Stuart, so that people understand, we are actually trying to encourage the towing companies to do this. They are providing a service. It is not cheap to get your car towed. We're not trying to rip people off. We are trying to be fair to all parties concerned. The complaints were actually, to me, have never been about the actual towing. It's always about the cost, because it's a sticker shock to many people who are already totally anxious. I want to keep framing that this is not about, you know, there have been some complaints that there's been some discrimination. There's only allegation. There's no proof that people get charged differently. Again, if we had a price list in detail, to your point, Chief, about if you need extra tow trucks and all that, I don't know if that's an exception or if that's the majority. So, Stuart, there must be in other municipalities that do a lot. New York City is tough. New York City has its own, I mean, they have an entire department that all they do is either outsource towing or half towing. They have entire, you know, real estate that goes for cars that are towed and impounded. I mean, for all of us who are fortunate enough to have their cars towed in every point in our life in the wonderful borough of Brooklyn or Queens, good luck with that. That takes like 3 days and hundreds of dollars. You know, it's a whole thing over there. I'm not sure they're the best. I like the Bill of Rights thing. That's sort of cool. Never heard of that before. So,
and I do have an interesting requirement, Mayor, that you don't see anywhere else, which is that if you have a vehicle that was involved in an accident, only the police can call the tow.
Oh, well, who would normally call if there's an accident?
You might.
No, if there's, so right now, the way it works is that if you're involved in an accident and I pull up, I'll give you an example. On my way home this afternoon, I came across a guy at Eldridge and Underhill, and his car was broke down. And the first thing we say is, do you have somebody coming? And he said, yes, I have roadside assistance and they'll be here. Okay, cool. He's out of the way. He's not causing a big traffic problem. We had a car sit on him. He's fine. He can call his own tow, and they came and they helped him and they got him going. If you're at 9A and 134 in the middle of the intersection and you're blocking things at rush hour, unless your tow company's here in the next 5 minutes, we're going to have somebody here to take you out of the way, because we can't stop all of New York State while we wait for AAA to show up. You can take it up with your insurance company after the fact, but that's the way that works. So we allow anybody that's not impounded to call anybody they want, unless there's like an emergency exception where it's going to be public safety or some major traffic issue. I don't know how you would mandate somebody that they can only be towed by your company. That it doesn't seem fair to me.
Actually, never occurred to me. I mean, I've just never been in an accident, so I don't know.
Honestly, we really don't want to get in the business of towing cars any more than we have to. And I think that's really the theme behind let people call their own companies, because the less we're involved, the better it is.
All right. So I think a lot of this is, let's put something on paper and get reactions, because if nobody reacts, they can't come back and complain. They've got to either react or they're not interested enough, and that's okay. You know, it'll be our best guesstimate at this based on what we're hearing here today. It also can't go on. This conversation can't go on meeting after meeting. So I think we need to bring it to conclusion. What else are you missing? And anybody, just raise your hand and jump in. This isn't something that usually trustees spend a lot of time on, but it's been like a couple of decades. It's just time to do it. And the village has grown. What do we have? Manny, is that you?
Yeah, that's me. Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to agree with the chief on this. I mean, all the suggestions that he made, it makes sense to me. Obviously, I want to make sure that we are not minimizing the opportunity for the tow companies that we have here to, I don't want it just like everybody has to have a fence 6 feet or 7 feet high. and is only one or two companies that are able to do that. I want to make sure is the equity is throughout. That's one. I do agree with what you just mentioned. This kind of reminds me to the leaf blower law that we passed a couple of years back. And you know, when we called the landscapers, we had a few meetings, and then we went through. Just keep something in mind. Regardless of the fees, whatever fees we put into this, we can modify the fees at any time of the year. It doesn't have to be something set in stone. We can change that. We usually do it every once a year, but we've done modifications to the fees in the middle of the year. So that to me is not a concern. If we get it wrong by $2 or whatever the case may be, if that's a concern of that they may have, we can look into it and we can make the modifications later on.
Okay.
This is the tricky part for me though. The information on the website. Because right now, and I know this is a topic of a different conversation, but it kind of comes back to the same point. The police department does not have a website. A lot of the information that we've been putting into behalf of the police department is in our website. So I think, again, this is not about the website conversation, but I think we have to have a conversation about the website of the police department.
Right.
If that's the way we're going to go, because we do have to centralize all these things. So we keep adding things that we should be putting that under the police department in a way, but we are forgetting on one thing that we need is a website. So with that, I'm going to leave it alone. And I think we should just definitely put something in writing and then go from there.
Right. Nobody's forgetting that there's not a website, but it's a chicken and egg conversation. If we wait till a website is done and put a list together of what goes on the website and figure out what the best way is, it'll be 6 or 9 or 10 months from now. If we have things that need to be done because of different pieces of legislation, we will either put it on the village site under something that makes sense, like a link to something called police issues or whatever, and we'll start posting things and we'll move them when there's a website that's completed. There's no like great way, you know, we're not building a new company where we have the luxury of saying, let's put a nice project plan together and we'll build a site and then we'll do it. You know, these are continuously moving issues. And from my perspective, you know, a on paper laminated price list at the police department that everybody has that says the same thing in Spanish and English would be a step forward. If it's on the tow trucks or in the tow trucks and people have a right to see it, and wherever people pick up their car, there is a price list that's approved by the village, that is a step forward. You know, so you've got different places you can put them on. I just waiting till we have the website to then put things on. I don't know in this day and age if it's necessary.
No, Mayor, no.
But nobody's forgetting that we need a website.
No. I'm not disregarding. I'm not saying that we should wait for the police website to happen for us to put that information. I'm just saying that yes, we should definitely have that in a website. But you know, a lot of the stuff, yes, we can put it under the village category where we have the other information from the police. But you know, eventually, yes, we have to have. I think we have to have a police website, police department's website as well, where we can transfer all that information over.
Right. Well, I think, or you know, a subsite or whatever. So all agreed. I feel like there was something we were missing in this conversation, though, that Stuart brought up. Stuart, we got the credit cards and we want them or not. The fencing.
We talked about the posting you mentioned, Mayor. The audit was something you had talked about.
Right.
And that's, as I said, more really a record keeping aspect, which can certainly, and again, I'm not sure how long the tow companies currently keep their records, but the board can certainly indicate how long they want to do that. And you know, the fees we can certainly work on. What I would suggest, along the lines of something that Trustee Quezada was saying, is that rather than put the fees into the law, which you put the fees into the fee schedule, because it is far easier to change the fee schedule than to amend the law to change the fees. What many municipalities say is basically they can't charge more than the maximum that the village has, and please refer to the fee schedule. and then, you basically do it there. And so I'm just, just more to make it
Okay.
easier as you go on.
All right, so let's talk about the auditing. So, Karen, you have other times where we've looked at processes, and then we did an audit at about, like we did that for the community center, and I think most of your departments, right? Like there was some sort of a, right? Like, because a system is only, and the platform is only as good as the humans behind it, right? So people are doing what they're supposed to do, but there doesn't seem to be a system in place that measures sort of logs on the towing company side with the police department. It doesn't actually connect from what I understand. So it isn't a question whether there's a rotating system. Of course there's a rotating. It's the question of, I tried 3 times and this guy never called me back. And this guy, when you ask him, will say, nobody called me 3 times. How do you know they did that? Who says so? Where does it say that? I was here. I don't see it on my phone, blah, blah. And it goes on and on and on. So it seems to me, and now this is my there are 3 parties here. There's the police, the consumer, and the towing companies. And we want to be equitable across all of them. And you've done audits where you've looked, I think, at the community center and how petty cash is handled. I mean, didn't we do this? Were you a village manager at that point? Or was that done by somebody else?
I don't remember the petty cash audit, but we certainly can work and support the police department and assist in trying to put together a process here that makes sense for everybody. So
okay, I mean, unless anybody wants to say why we shouldn't have it, I think that at the very least, at the starting point, since we haven't done any of this sort of stuff for 2 decades, it would probably behoove us to follow the system throughout. If I read the numbers correctly and the data that the chief sent me, we're talking about a decent sum of money per month that passes hands, meaning that an average tow times the number of tows per month, it's more than a few a month. So when it comes to things like that, it isn't the village is collecting money here, right? It's not that. But since you have a finance department, and since audits are not unusual to have done, and even if you have to have somebody do it, to do like just a benchmark, get that done so we all know that everybody's being treated equitably with the police. If you and the chief could put something together, I don't think that's a law. I think that would be helpful to make people feel that, there's a system in place and that we're moving forward, similar to what Manny was saying, that it's sort of time to look at a site for the police, because some places do, most places now have them. And it came up in the police reform implementation discussion as well, about communication and why not have a website, et cetera, et cetera. So it has come up a few times. So I think this might be helpful. Is there a reason we wouldn't do something like that? Is that a problem? I don't know. What am I missing?
I think if you're auditing and you want to have energy well spent, I don't think you're going to get a lot of bang from your buck from auditing the call list from the cops. The answer to you say you called and you didn't is simple. Our calls are recorded. And we have all that data. And we've had that where a person said you didn't call and we go, here it is. We let them listen to it. Here's your voicemail coming on. So that's really an internal complaint. That's between us and the tow companies. I don't think I've ever heard of a resident saying they don't know which tow company's next. They wouldn't have any.
No, this would be in my 3-party discussion. This would be from the towing company.
Right. So, but what I'm saying though is if the tow company's complaining, that's easy. That's sort of an internal process where they make a complaint to the board, presumably, or whoever, and then we're able to say, here's the calls or not the calls. I think if you're really looking to get bang for your buck from an audit, you're looking at the money collected by the tow companies to ensure that, because we're contracting that out. And while the money doesn't pass through here, we need to ensure that people are being treated fairly. So certainly there's a mechanism to make sure the tow companies are all getting their fair shake. And we've had that conversation from time to time with them if there's been a concern that somebody's not getting a call. I recall a few years back where one of them changed their phone number and didn't tell us, so we were calling the wrong number. But those are things that are really like sort of internal processes. I think that if you really want to find out where there's a problem that the government should be overseeing that doesn't get checked, It's ensuring that the tow companies are charging appropriate fees and getting receipts back from them or some sort of log from them. And if you're going to create an audit, I think that's really the consumer end of things is really where people want to know they're being treated fairly. So in terms of what that would look like, either having them be subject to random audit or quarterly, picking one of them or however. But I think that's really where your energy is best spent on auditing. I mean, I'm glad
Okay.
to.
No, it's a fair point. Let's leave that on the table. But I like what you said before that, which is, or somebody said it, that the towing company should keep logs. So that could actually be something that we request. Like they got called, so there's a match up there because it avoids a lot of this conversation. So maybe that's something that, or was it Stuart that said that that's something that's done? I don't remember who said it. I thought it was the chief, but just not sure. But there needs, in most systems, there is two ends to the conversation, right? The police will call, say, I called you 3 times, here's the proof. The other, the recipient says, no, you didn't. Okay, so show me your log. You're saying, like, I didn't call you. Let me see. I did call you. No, you didn't. Blah, blah, blah. You go through the whole thing. But I think if they were required to keep a log, it would also be, give them the ability to say, I want to match up against, we want to match that up against the calls done by the police. And I think the very act of doing it might be actually helpful. As far as doing like quarterly or something, good idea. I don't think we need to discuss it though tonight because I don't think we're passing, that's not a law per Stuart. So that's something we might want to table for now. As far as the audit, I don't want to waste time doing audits. I just know that we've done them elsewhere, and those audits were not to find out whether people are misbehaving or taking money or anything. Actually, those audits were done to find efficiencies and improvements in how transactions are done. It actually drove to a lot of improvements, operational improvements. It wasn't about, I only used petty cash. I think it was before your time, Karen, because it turns out that a number of people had these boxes with petty cash for the, the vending machines and all that. It's just not good to have that many. So they reduced it, I think, to 1 under, the finance department. It was an operational efficiency issue. That's what the audit was done for. It wasn't to catch anybody doing anything. They actually didn't catch anybody doing anything. In fact, many people are putting their own money in to give change to people because they, are so friendly to the people. And that's what it reminded me of. It was done for operational efficiencies and fairness. It wasn't done really to catch anybody. So anyway, did we cover all the bases, Stuart, from doing a law point of view? And I'll drive these over in the morning and bring these to you.
That's fine. From my perspective, Mayor, we're good. So we can proceed.
Okay. Anybody else? Okie dokie. I know, not the most exciting of topics, but once in 20 years, I think not necessarily bad. Okay.
Thank you. So next up, we are discussing a recommendation to go forward with Municity, a company that we've been working with. It's our building and planning software. This has taken an enormous amount of work on behalf of the staff and the trustees. Trustee Casada in particular has this is really, I want to say, one of his pet projects. I think this was again started right about the time that I started 2 years ago, and Trustee Casada was very passionate about making sure that we could do things online and coming into the 21st century. And we did have some successes, but the company we originally went with just didn't work out for a variety of reasons. We've been involved in doing a lot of due diligence on what the best way to go forward is. We do have an issue with Municity. They will not be supporting the software that we currently have. And they have another product that we've looked into and evaluated. I want to say that Joe and Jaime, other members of the staff, as well as Trustee Casada, have been involved in looking at this from almost every angle. So it's after a lot of consideration and some missteps that we're looking forward to being able to go forward and really fully automate the planning and building department. So with that, I will turn it over to Jaime and Joe, and they can give you the rest of the story here.
I think I'm going to defer to Joe here in the moment because it's definitely it's a big building department thing, and planning department plays a role. So I think I'm going to let Joe kind of take
And
a chance.
I do want to include, I forgot to mention Maddi Zachacz, who, of course, was very helpful in orchestrating. She's looking at me and laughing, but she was very helpful in orchestrating all of this work. So I do want to reference her as well. I think she'll be taking us through the proposal. So.
Okay, I mean, I can kind of give everyone a little bit of a update or background on it. So, you know, for a long time, we've been talking about trying to provide software that would be better for the public to use, where they can submit applications, whether it be for the planning department or building department online. A software program that will allow applicants to be able to follow the process and the progress of their applications through all the steps all the way, and they can view a lot of information for their own properties. So as everyone knows, in the past, we tried a software company that we thought would give us you know, all the aspects of all what we needed in software, and unfortunately it didn't work out. So we kind of regrouped, and in the short term, since then, we've offered somewhat of that same service to the public by allowing them, especially during COVID, to be able to submit their applications by email. And then we upload everything and take payment over the phone or online, credit card, or they can mail in a check. And then we email them back all their documents when they receive a permit. They get a copy of their plans approved. So we've made it work in the you know, in the last year or so. But ultimately, we do need a program that's going to allow the applicants to do, you know, something for a software that would do a lot more, you know, to make the process a lot easier, so the staff is not uploading everything, but the applicant would do that once they submit. And maybe the payment can be done easier than having to take a payment and a credit card over the phone, and us putting it into you know, into the credit card machine, or waiting for a check to be mailed in. So, you know, ultimately we want to get something that's going to even be better for the public. So we shopped around for a number of software companies and asked them to give us estimates, give us information as to, you know, what they can offer, you know, what municipalities in our area that they service at this time. And it seemed to be the one that does the biggest amount of service in the area is Municity. And their new program, Municity 5, which offers everything that we're asking to give to the public, is basically, I would say, about 30 or so municipalities in Westchester County are using that currently. I've asked a lot of them what they felt about the program. A lot of them spoke highly of it and said they liked it, and that it did all what they were asking for. I mean, like every other program, there's always a little bit of glitches, but that comes with every software. A lot of the other ones that we asked, that we did some research on, you know, they may offer the similar stuff that we're looking for in a software program, but you know, a number of them don't service municipalities in the area. Some can only do a portion of what we're asking for and not all of it. And we felt that, you know, after what originally happened when we went with Simprosity, trying a new software program, and what we were promised and what we actually got did not work out. We felt if all the companies that are offering us the software package now are offering similar pricing, and some, you know, similar software that we can use, that it would probably be best for us to use the company that we've been working with over the last 10, 11 years, because we already know what they already offer and the service that they provide for us. So we thought that the best way to go with this would stay with Municity, with their new program, Municity 5. It's better to go with a company we already have a history with. The other problem we also have is the fact that we're on an older version of Municity now, and they're not going to be supporting that in the next couple of months. If we were to go with another company, we would have a gap until that new program could be up and running, which would probably take anywhere between 9 months to 12 months to get into place by the time we transfer all the data, get all the training and so forth. That the concern would be if we have a gap of say 6 or 7 months and something was to go wrong with our current program, we wouldn't really have anybody who can actually attend to it and service and fix it. So we thought the wisest way to do this is to stick with the same company that we already know and we already have a history with. At the same time, to try to go with that company, what they can provide to the public going, hopefully to have it up, say, by the next year. And in the meantime, as part of that agreement, Municity would agree to support the current program we have until we can make that transfer. So we discussed it as a staff and felt as a group that this was the proper way to go forward with this. And this is what we're trying to present to the board tonight to see if the board is also in agreement to allow us to go through with a contract to go forward with the new Municity 5 program. Hopefully have that running for the public, say, within the next year.
Yeah. And I would, only add to that just a little bit here that, we really kind of got into a place where even though there were other companies that provided some products that had some similarities, none of them really engendered any sort of real confidence that they would be able to provide something that was better than Municity and that we were real secure that they would be able to do what Municity has a long track record of doing, right? So we'd sort of be entering into that same situation we were with Simprocity, sort of taking a leap on faith. And we just didn't really have the ability to, to take that kind of a risk, considering, this is something that's very important. And so the alternative was to say, we're going to stick with Municity, the version that we have now, deal with the fall that may come, and continue to provide services the way that we do now, which is basically, doing things over the phone, doing things where they're emailed. And that is working now, but it's really a challenge for the staff at the front of the office who have to handle those because they're dealing with, increasing numbers of people that are showing up during the day, a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, and trying to keep track of conversations that are taking place, some on an email, some on a phone call, some by, one person over here, whether it's, Joan on one side or Lori on the other side, and really just try to coordinate all that. And so Municity does something that will allow us to kind of integrate that whole system together and create a communication loop to the applicant as well. But there are some additional things that it does provide that we're really interested in getting into, which is the code enforcement heat mapping, right? So we can sort of take, all of the instances where we know that there have been different types of code enforcement issues, put them on a map together, and that should help us down the road to help target some of these areas that we know, really need a little bit more attention. And so that's kind of an added benefit. And the only other thing that I would say is that I really just want to thank Maddi for, presenting a lot of leadership in this process. It's been difficult for us to get to where we are today. And it was through Maddi's work that she was able to get Municity to sharpen their pencil, bring the price down a little bit. And so, it's important to sort of note her really critical role in helping to get us to where we are today.
Yes, I agree. I'm glad you brought that up. Maddi has done a wonderful job in this. And she's done a lot of work and research, putting a lot of this together for a presentation to the board today.
Thank you both. It was an incredible team effort. I know that, I don't want to cut anybody off, but we had sent a memo along to the board, sort of, going into the history that Karen, Jaime, and Joe had sort of just given to you now, as well as sort of the analysis that Joe had put together, as well as what would be required in terms of a budget adjustment. So the ask at this time would be to put forward a resolution to approve a contract, certainly after any questions have been answered. As Jaime said, we did push back quite a bit. General Code is actually the vendor that supplies this. The board is probably quite familiar with General Code. They do a lot of work for the village in a lot of different areas. But so we did push back on them quite a bit in order to get this proposal sort of whittled down and sort of change how they administer the training. And there are a couple pricing incentives that they have extended to us as well, which, you know, if we meet certain benchmarks along the process, if we were to go forward, there are certain discounts built in along the way. But there is also a you know, relatively significant pricing discount if we are able to get to contract within the next couple of weeks. So I did just want to call that to your attention. We, along with the IT department and with Treasurer Brennan, remain eager to answer any questions that you might have to sort of enable us to move faster if that is the will of the board.
Mayor, may I go first?
Yeah, please.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you for all of this. And I really, besides thanking Maddi for putting all this stuff together, I definitely want to thank Joe actually for stepping up to the plate after we had to cut ties with our previous vendor. He really stepped up in regards to, and all his staff and all the building department staff in regards to that. We keep in the middle of the pandemic to actually to cut tie backs with a brand new program that we were hoping to move along, you know, on the online version. You know, Joe and his staff did a fantastic job. So I don't want to take anything away from all the work that he did, and they're still doing it. I mean, until now, and there's a challenge. And I think you know, they took that and they moved from there. So I have a few things, sure. Obviously the budget. So Maddi, I want to make sure that we all understand this. I want you to kind of give us an idea of how much we were paying for the previous project that we had, how much we asking, what is the difference between that, what are the services. I know I know all these things, but because this is a work session, I want to make sure the public is aware of this. Sure. So I want you to give us a whole detail of all that stuff. What are we getting for what? You know, an adjustment of $100,000 is a lot. Sure, in the middle of this whole thing, our perspective was we did the budget. We already had a budget line into this, and we increasing that budget. But I want to make sure the public understands the reason why we're trying to get to this. The other point of this is, yes, there's a great tools on Municity 5 for building department. I want to be clear though. I want to make sure it's like we have Excel sheets, we have Word documents. You know, Excel program itself has, I literally, I know 2 functions on it, you know, multiplications, additions, subtractions, that kind of stuff, but we barely scratch the surface of Excel. We barely scratch the surface of all these programs that we have. So I want to make sure, because we are paying so much money, if the board is willing to go for this particular vendor, sure, that we're going to be paying all this money and we're not going to utilize all their tools. And I'm going to be very specific. Something that, you know, I heard from Jaime before, and I heard it today. They don't utilize this software too much. I want to make sure the planning department takes advantage of this. I want to make sure that they utilize these tools to the 110 or 20%, because it will be a great tool for them as a coordination with the building department as well. So I think for us to pay for something and not utilize it, I will feel really bad that I'll be wasting taxpayers' money. But again, I think if Joe is supporter of this, I'll be supporter of this as well. I think it's a great program. I was in one of the part of the presentation. I know Maddi had all the conversations with them. I was not part of those, but I did look at their video. I did look at their training and what they do. I think they have great functions. So I'll be in favor of supporting this, because I think we have to move on to the next level, and I'm hoping that will be the case. So Maddi, if you please talk about the budget.
Yeah.
Talk about the key instance that we have. Could you talk about the time frame? If we were to switch this to this new board, to this new function, and what does that look like for us? So those are sort of common questions that I have.
Okay, so if I miss anything, please remind me, because that was sort of a lot. So the time frame that we're looking at, and I want to try to stay away from using the word conversion, because this is, for all intents and purposes, an entirely new product, right? So, I mean, they're doing all of the, moving over the data, which is going to be easier for them because it's their own data. So formatting is going to be easier than it might otherwise be for another company. But they're basically building, this product, for us. It's not like they're just updating the version that we have. So they're looking at about a 9 to 12 month timetable. And again, they want to get it done sooner rather than later, which is why they've sort of built in those little incentives along the way to keep us on track, right? Because certainly there's going to be work required of us to, keep the process rolling. So I am confident that if we go forward in the time frame that I mentioned earlier, that by this time next year, we'll be fully up and running, and hopefully well before that. In terms of the budget, if I could share my screen, Mayor, is that all right? This is the segment from the proposal that we're looking at now. So you can see in the left-hand column, that's the amount that would be due for the first year. And then going forward, it would be this price on the right-hand side. However, the budget that we're actually looking at, we have found a lot of significant savings this year in the building department budget, specifically related to, we thought we were going to hire people sooner on in the year than we ended up doing. So we have some found savings in that regard, which is great news. So we actually will handily be able to cover the full amount in this year's budget for not only the ongoing operating costs, but then also the training component. Also, we have about $6,700 budgeted annually for maintenance on the current Municity version, the enterprise version. So when you subtract out what we would need to pay going forward, when you subtract the $6,700 out from that, it's about a $21,000 budget gap. So if we're going forward, we would either be asking the board to add that as a new budget item. So for the 2022 budget, it would be an increase to that line in software, or we could, think of some other creative ways to fill the gap. Trustee Quesada, does that sort of put it together from the budget and timeline angle?
Yes. Can you tell us what was the previous software company that we had? What was it then?
Right. So it was General Code, but the product that we have right now is Municity Enterprise, which is, from my understanding, Joe, please correct me, is like their first ever version of Municity. So it's quite old. Is that accurate, as far as you know?
Not that. I'm talking about the previous budget that we had for the software that we.
I'm sorry. So I don't know how much you paid for it. I believe it was 12 or 13 years ago, what the upfront cost was.
Not that, sorry, Maddi. So we just had a software program that we were trying out for almost 9 months, correct?
I'm sorry. Okay. So that implementation was before my time with the village. Karen and Joe, please correct me, and Stuart. I believe that was being paid on a per application fee. So yes, there was not a cost outlay up front, but that was going to come out of each application going forward.
Yeah. Right. The applicant, we had added on the $25 or $15, depending on the type of the permit, was paid when the application, by application that was submitted. Yes.
So, Joe, do you remember how much was it? Because we did have a contract with them. And how much was that as a budget line that we added last time? That's what I'm trying to get. I don't remember.
I don't think that they had a cost. It was we never actually paid them anything. I think it was he was going to offer this program. I think we were only supposed to pay maybe Stuart remembers the cost, but we were supposed to just pay, I think, just some sort of one-time
like a maintenance. It was like
it was over 3 years.
Yeah, for 3 years.
It was over 3 years. He was charging us $16,500. We were going to pay 3 years of $5,500 per year. And on top of that, the cost of per application was $25 per application.
$25 that was going to go to them directly per application itself. Correct.
Well, so we were paying $5,500 per year for the first 3 years.
Correct. So it was obviously number-wise, it was a totally different restructure of how we were paying for it. Yes. But remember, we did increase the application portions on the building department and planning department because of that. So that's the point that I was trying to make. So thanks, Joe and Maddi, for that. So yeah, the other program that we have has been there for years. We bought it outright and they don't want to maintain it, obviously. It's like someone that learned how to work on the computer with DOS. So it's like they don't function anymore. But Windows 95, you know, they don't support that anymore.
Well, wasn't there a point with this Improsity or somebody that they couldn't fulfill something and they waived the fee at one point?
There's a whole history in that one. I don't think I don't want to rehash that whole thing.
That was last year.
I don't want to remember what happened last year.
They couldn't meet any of the deadlines that we went live before they were really ready, and it was causing a lot of problems for the public and the staff. And then they tried to make good on it in the beginning by waiving some of the fees to try to go forward and make amends for it, but it never got any better. So we decided that it just wasn't worth to continue doing this because we were getting a very bad feedback from the public because it was not simple to use, and we figured that after a couple of months of trying it, we did the best we could with them. We spoke to them numerous times, and it just was better to part ways and move on from there. Well, one of the things I would say also, Maddi, that I guess you could, as part of your presentation for when you're talking about the dollars, you know, the current municipal program that we're on requires for us to create storage for the data, and this new Municipal 5 is stored on a cloud, so we don't have to purchase any storage for any of the data. I don't know the time frame of how often Craig Cooper has to buy more storage, but he does spend thousands of dollars every so often to create more storage, because obviously as we create more permits, more pictures, more violations, more applications, we have to increase the storage. So the village is actually paying from time to time, whatever it is, $5,000, $10,000 to constantly purchase storage. With this program, we would never purchase storage at all. It's all stored on the cloud. So there is a savings in that on that end as well.
Yeah, Craig mentioned that he buys a new server every couple of years, and like Joe mentioned, to the tune of several $1,000s each time.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is, if I read it right, capable, you have iPads or whatever, and you can do your inspections, iPad submit it, it's in, and it's done. And it's all stored.
That's one of the coolest parts is that they can actually, you know, after they visit a property, they can create a report right from the car.
Right. White Plains been doing this for years.
We actually purchased tablets a number of years ago with the intent of using it this way. So we own the tablets, and they're going to integrate the current tablets that we have to work with their program. So it's not that we have to purchase any of those, of any of that, any tablets or anything for the staff. They're going to actually take the equipment that we have now and make it work for their program. So and the idea would be, as you said, is it can all be, you know, they can access everything they need right off the tablet in the field to make this a lot easier for code enforcement and building inspectors.
So, Joe, in one of my recollections way back, years back, it was in regards to the printer. Sure. I'm hoping it will be a different printer, because we stopped using that printer for one of the reasons that we were told is in the winter, it just doesn't print because of it was way too cold. So if we're going to be printing out something, you know, make sure we have good printers that are utilized in our vehicles, you know, or just emailing stuff. I think, you know, would be a great way to save paper as well.
Yeah, and in the past, the way we were on the program, because we weren't emailing violations and things of sort, we had to figure out how to print them if we were going to have the tablets or laptops on in the vehicles. But the tablet that we had at the time only, and this was a tablet we had prior to the ones we actually have now, you can only print on one type of printer, and that printer only didn't print on regular paper. It actually printed on that paper that, you know, I forget basically what you call it. It was the one where over time the print on it would fade away. So it wasn't.
The heat sensitive paper. It went away with the dinosaurs, but yeah.
Yes, that's correct. I forget. So it's old, so old. I even forget what they call it at this point. But right. Okay. So what we do now is we can, the fact that we would have all the information of the owner, their email addresses, contact information, even for inspections that are done by the assistant building inspectors, they can do the inspections and immediately right on the site, prove them, fail them, whatever it is, and email them a copy right then and there, and they can send it to the owner, they can send it to the contractor, or the architect. Everybody can get it at one time, so it's not on paper. They're all getting an email of the inspection report immediately, so it keeps everybody in the loop of what's going on during the entire project. It would save a lot because we can issue the violations. We can give them by email. There are procedures that we still have to do by court, by, you know, sending them out certified mail and so forth if it's a court appearance ticket for servicing, but we can send the notices of violation. We can give them, you know, stop work orders. We can give a lot right on site just through the tablet, just by sending it to them through the software.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so thank you very much. I'm going to be an optimist and think third time's the charm. This entire, I've heard this before, and maybe this time things will work out. Tablets that were never used, etc. You know, we were told how advanced we were going to be when we first bought those tablets, but I'm feeling like optimistic this time. And you know, thank you for, you know, trying to find the best financial deal. I guess a company decides that they will no longer support a platform that we have. You know, what do? Do we put in contracts going forward that if they stop supporting something and the contract's still alive, that they have to pay us in order to bring on a new vendor? I don't know. Beyond my knowledge of how things work, I trust that you guys did all your homework. I do have to say that Manny has a strong point, and I think, Joe, you've been here long enough to know that we buy fancy stuff, but we don't have the people who use them, or use them well, or use them correctly. So I really beg that on this round, that if we're going to buy a good platform with accessories in plain English, that people use them accordingly, that they get trained accordingly. Otherwise, what the heck is the point of it all, right? I wish there was something we can do to get the old vendor to pay for, I know the word conversion is not what you want to use, Maddi, but frankly, leaving us hanging like that is also like, should be on them. And there should be some way that we contractually hold people who don't support platforms that we pay a lot of money for and time. I remember the training that went into this. It was a lot of time. So I don't know how to get around that, but it's a little bit beyond me. Somehow towing wasn't beyond me, but this is. And I think I've gone through this in my career a number of times with people who do a lot of support work. I never understand it. We're not the only municipality in New York. We all do the same thing. Nothing that you're doing isn't something that hundreds of municipalities around the US do. And yet it's as if we're the only ones, like, where are the vendors, right? But I trust you guys to figure all this out. I hope that this is the winner. This is it. I'm getting good vibes here, folks. I appreciate all the work. Unless anybody has anything else, we should be putting this up for next week for resolution, right?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes,
fabulous.
We plan to do that.
Fabulous. Thank you all. Are we going? I think we're done with the agenda. Yep. Is there anything else? I'm not seeing anything. Are we having executive or legal? Nope. Okie dokie then, folks. Got a lot done tonight. Appreciate everybody's input and help. It felt very operationally, but you know, some meetings are totally operations, they're all different. All right. Thank you all, and see everybody at the next one, which is next Wednesday at the regular hour. I will say good night. Meeting adjourned.
Night.